IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. It is Wednesday. We are now 4 days away from Notre Dame kicking off their 2025 season down in Miami Gardens against the Hurricanes. Brian, yesterday we took a look at just kind of this matchup big picture. Today, we're going to sit down and break down these matchups on either side of the football. We're going to start off today's show by talking Notre Dame offense versus Miami defense. Part two of today's show, we're going to be talking Notre Dame defense versus the Miami offense. And then we're going to round out today with a mailbag. So, folks, be sure to get your mailbag questions in. If you want your question or comment set aside, put an MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji. That lets us know to set that question aside. We'll get to it in part three of today's show. But, Brian, when we look at this matchup, one, huge implications with this one. We went through and talked big picture yesterday. Top 10 matchup to kick off the season. Notre Dame hasn't beaten a top 10 team on the road since October of 2012 when they went down to Norman and beat the Sooners, which is crazy to think about. But that's the opportunity in front of them. Today, we're going to talk about how do they get that done? What are the things that Notre Dame will have to do? Where are the areas that they're going to have to win on offense and defense to make sure that they fly back to South Bend with a W?
Yeah, I mean, it's about diving into the matchup and saying, okay, this is who Miami is. This is who Notre Dame is. Here's where they're good at. Here's where Notre Dame is good at. And obviously tomorrow we'll have keys to victory, and we'll dive into that. We'll talk game records tomorrow, so we're going to break that up a little bit. But this is a really intriguing matchup, Trevor, and I'm excited for us to finally be able to actually dive into the particulars of this matchup. You know, I've spent last night today diving into the film, looking at some Minnesota stuff, some Miami stuff, and what you have is you have a matchup between two talented teams that I think are going to be two well-coached teams from a coordinator standpoint. And, you know, obviously we've talked a lot about Mario Cristobal and all these other type of things, but, you know, look, Shannon Dawson did a great job last year at Miami, leading the number one ranked offense in the country. And Corey Heatherman did a tremendous job, you know, rebuilding a Minnesota defense that had fallen on hard times the year before. And he was able to get them back on track and allow them to play really strong football and be one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. And so he comes over to repair a defense that wasn't very good last year in the league. But, yeah, the number 4 defense in the Big Ten last year, and he took over a team that the year before ranked 10th in the Big Ten in scoring defense. So it's going to be a great battle between, you know, I believe two well-coached teams, two talented teams. And you're going to have to weather the storm literally, because looking at the weather forecast, it's a almost 80% chance of rain. It's supposed to be a lot of scattered thunderstorms at night. So you've got to there's just a lot on the plate for both of these teams. And for Notre Dame, it's going to be a true, strong first test to find out how good this football team is. I think we can agree that Notre Dame has the overall better roster. This is a game that you look at and say the matchups favor Notre Dame, but this is not a game. And this, like, we've been asked also, do you think they're going to beat them by double digits? I'm like, maybe, but like, this is a better Miami team than people I think that it is. And, you know, this is a team that went 10-2 in the regular season last year, was undefeated until November. And Notre Dame's going to have a test. Like, look, Notre Dame beat Louisville by a touchdown. They beat Louisville by a touchdown in a game where they went down up to Louisville and beat Louisville. It's going to be a heck of a game. I'm concerned. I mean, I told Sean Stiers this today because Sean's flying down to cover the game for Irish Breakdown. And I said, I'm just afraid it's going to, because they're saying thunderstorms and lightning. I just pray that this isn't like one of those games that's just like with constant delays and stuff like that. And I really hope that doesn't happen. But, you know, look, if that's the case, then that's the case, and you figure it out like they did, you know, Marcus Freeman's second year when that happened against NC State. Now, a little difference is if this gets delayed, you're finishing the game like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. But, you know, it's a different story for a different day. But, look, you got to go out and handle business. You got to play your game, execute. And I'm excited to talk about the keys to victory tomorrow. But this is going to be more of a looking at the matchups and really diving into just what are the, like, looking at the players and the stats and the coaches, what are the matchups that are going to have the biggest impact in this game? And it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, let's get this thing started, Brian. Let's talk Notre Dame offense versus Miami defense. And I know that we're going to bring up some stats here, and we're using essentially the stats from 2024 because unfortunately there's no game for us to go off of yet. But this is a side of the ball where there's a lot of questions on both cases, right? I mean, you have Notre Dame's offense, who redshirt freshman quarterback. We don't know what that's going to look like. We have an idea. Miami has a new defensive coordinator who's going to be stepping in to take over a unit that was really struggling last season. And so when we take a look at what these stats tell us, it's that on paper, depending on the area, that favors Notre Dame a little bit. But again, it's a new defensive scheme. You got some new pieces in the secondary, so there's going to be some things that look different for the Hurricanes.
There is, and on the other side of the ball, like you said, both sides are going to have you can't look at Notre Dame's offense in 2024 and Miami's offense in 2024, defense in 2024, and say those two units are going against each other. It isn't. I think there's certainly for Notre Dame, there's going to be some similarities in certain areas, but there's going to be some differences. How you call an offense with CJ Carr at quarterback is going to look a whole lot different than how you call an offense with Riley Leonard at quarterback. The Miami defense, you can say, well, they had this problem and they struggled here and they struggled there. And I'm like, yeah, all those things are true, but it's different personnel, different defensive coordinator, and which makes it a little bit interesting. But there are some things that you can look at, because the statistical analysis, and we'll just bring this up now while we're kind of diving through it, Trev, but the statistical analysis is interesting because, okay, yeah, you've got a new quarterback and you've got a new coordinator on the other side of the ball. Well, what they were last season are the things they have to build on that were strengths, or improve that were weaknesses. And that's a big part of when we talk about this matchup, Trevor, is saying, like, look, if Notre Dame is going to win this football game, they're going to have to score. Look, we'll get into the matchup with the Notre Dame defense again in a second, but like, this is not a game I think you're going to win 13-10 unless it's just a downpour and it looks like NC State from 2016. I just don't think that's the case. I think this is a situation where, Notre Dame's going to have to come out and move the ball and put points on the board. I don't think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think Notre Dame should be able to do some good things on defense, but they're going to have to help their defense out. And perhaps more than they have the last few years. I mean, look, Notre Dame has started the season. This will be the fourth time they've started against a ranked opponent a ranked Power 4 opponent on the road, third time in 4 years. And in those other two games, Notre Dame scored 10 and 23 points. That may not be enough in this game. And you certainly want to get off to a good start, which is going to be key. But when you look at the statistics, Trevor, and you start breaking it down, the first thing that really stands out from a matchup standpoint is looking at the Notre Dame rushing offense against the Miami rush defense, because look, if you're going to be who you want to be at Notre Dame, you're going to have to be a team that can go out there and run the football on people. And I think CJ Carr's got a chance to be a star quarterback at some point in time. I don't expect him to do that in start number one. I think it's going to take time for him to get to that point in time. But even beyond that, this is your identity. This is who you are. Yeah. And what we saw last season is, on paper, the numbers look great, kind of for both teams, but even more so for Notre Dame. They both ranked 19th in the country in rush offense and defense. Notre Dame ranked 19th in rushing yards per game at 200.9. Miami ranked 19th in rushing yards allowed at 112.8. Notre Dame ranked 7th in yards per attempt. They ranked 29. They ranked 8th with 29 runs of 20 yards or more. Miami ranks 35th in yards allowed per play. The touchdowns don't mean a whole lot. They both ranked 37th in tackles for loss. Notre Dame tackles for loss allowed. Miami tackles for loss generated. And so it's like, man, there's like a lot of things that are in common here. Notre Dame is a big play unit. Miami gave up big plays. That's the one thing that's different here. And what Miami fans are going to say, and understandably so, well, yeah, that was due to the coordinator, and that won't be as big of an issue this season. And well, why do you say that? Well, I mean, Minnesota ranked 37th last year in runs of 20 yards allowed or more. They gave up 13 compared to Miami, who gave up 18. That's a pretty big difference, in my opinion. And they played some teams that can run the ball, so they expect that to improve. I think Miami fans would rightly point to the fact that, well, we have better athletes than what Minnesota has. Maybe, I would say that's probably true. But are you going to be able to go out there and play and execute at a high level? Those are going to be questions. But at the end of the day, when it's a matchup of good on good, the team that wins that good on good matchup is going to have the best chance to go out there and win the football game, Trev. And that's going to be the big key for Notre Dame this season is can you find ways to go out there and do to Miami what needs to be done, which a lot of people couldn't do last year. They had 2 games where they got really beat on the ground. Virginia Tech ran for 206 yards, and they won that game 38-34. And then Georgia Tech ran for 271 yards in a game that Miami lost. The rest of the season, they gave up 139 to Florida, 62 to South Florida, 73 to Cal. They held Louisville to 106, held Florida State to 133, held Duke to 80, Wake Forest to 94, Syracuse to 99, and then Iowa State for 145. That's a pretty good performance. So, and then when you look at Notre Dame in the postseason, when they played better rush defenses, their offense didn't look as good running the football. Now that you could say, well, you had some injury to, Rocco got hurt in the first playoff game. Jeremiah Love was hurt. All right, that's fair. Janarian Price wasn't hurt, and he didn't run the ball very well either because they got beat up front. Yeah. So I think there's some things that this offensive line still has to prove in a game like this if they want to win. You want to be successful, Trev, and you want to talk about how Notre Dame hasn't won a road playoff game since 2012. It's not always the case, but in a lot of those instances, part of the problem was Notre Dame couldn't go on the road and run the football. Not always the case. 2015 against Stanford, Notre Dame ran for almost 300 yards. They lost that game because their defensive coordinator and their defense was terrible. But in a lot of instances, it's because they couldn't run the ball. Georgia, 2019. Michigan, 2019. Notre Dame was held to 100, less than 100 yards in both games. You look at them against Ohio State, 2022. Notre Dame went on the road. They weren't able to run the football, and they got beat. Clemson in 2023, Notre Dame ran the ball well in the first half. They finished with 183 yards. Most of that came in the first half. Couldn't run the ball in the second half of that game. Louisville, 2023, Notre Dame goes on the road, gets beat. They rushed for 44 yards. They ran for 76 yards on the road the year before against Ohio State. In the end of the season loss to USC, they only rushed for 90 yards. I mean, you're kind of picking up a theme here, Trev.
Yeah.
When Notre Dame doesn't play well, when Notre Dame beat Clemson in the regular season in 2020, they ran for 208 yards. When Clemson beat them in the ACC title game, Notre Dame ran for 44 yards. They were rushed for 46 yards against Michigan in 19, 47 against Michigan, 46 against Georgia that year. So this has been a consistent pattern that when Notre Dame plays in a lot of these big games, and this goes back a long time, I actually think we've had, a little bit more success in that regard under Marcus Freeman at times. I think of the Texas A&M game last year where Notre Dame, big part of the reason they won, they ran for 198 yards. So we've seen some games like that. But that's why this is such an important part of this matchup, Trevor, is if you're going to win this game, you've got to be able to go on the road and run the football. Find ways to run the football. Do that, and you're going to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to Marcus Freeman's overall philosophy. They have to be able to run the ball and stop the run. We're talking about Notre Dame offense right now. It hasn't even just been in true road games. I mean, in neutral site games, look at it in the playoffs. The offense struggled to get going. Why? Because they couldn't run the football with anybody except for Riley Leonard against Georgia. They struggled running the football in the first half against Penn State. Jeremiah Love ended the national championship game with 4 carries for 3 yards. Mm-hmm. And they ended up losing that game. So it just goes to further your point of in big-time matchups, Notre Dame has to be able to run the football. But big picture, looking at Notre Dame's offense versus Miami's defense, there's some unknowns about both units. It's unknown around how Notre Dame's portal receiving core is going to work and how their redshirt freshman quarterback is going to do. And for Miami, it's how is their transfer portal secondary going to be, and Corey Heatherman in his first year. But what this shows me, big picture, is that the rushing offense and rushing defense for both of these units is the foundation of what they're going to use to build on their season. And it's going to be our first opportunity to look at it on Sunday night. Miami's going to have to be able to stop the run, and Notre Dame's going to have to be able to run the ball. It's kind of that old school type matchup that you want to see in a top 10 game,
Yeah, and it is. It's a little bit of a throwback. I mean, Miami has had some periods where they've turned out some great running backs and had some great running games. I still say their 2000 depth at running back was some of the most absurd. I still don't know that I've seen a running back room like that. I'm going to pull it up to just give you an idea of who they had on that roster that year, Trev. But their leading rusher that year was James Jackson. They had Clinton. Actually, the next year is 2001. 2001. Their leading rusher was Clinton Portis. Their next leading rusher was Frank Gore. Their next leading rusher was Willis McGahee. They also had Najee Davenport and Jarrett Payton on that team as well. Like that was their running back room in 2001. It's a pretty good running back room. You know what I mean? So, and then they had Willis McGahee playing fullback. The next year he moves to running back and runs for over 1,700 yards. I mean, and so, yeah, I mean, this is the identity that both teams want to be. And when you go on the road, if you have to be able to impose your will on the opponent, that's just the reality of it. You've got to be able to impose your will on the opponent. And Miami's not a team that wants to allow you to do that. You know, you look at Mario Cristobal and his tenure at Miami, in that time, he's lost 16 games in 3 years. And in half of those games, they've given up over 200 rushing yards. And half of those games they lost. They gave up over 200 yards to Georgia Tech last year. Gave up 200 yards the year before to North Carolina. 200 yards in a loss. 200 yards to Rutgers in a loss. They gave up 200 yards to Duke in a loss. Over 200 yards in Florida State in a loss. Over 200 yards to Clemson in a loss, and over 200 yards to Pittsburgh in a loss. So that's 7 of those 16 games they've given up over 200 yards in a loss. And if it wasn't for some last-second heroics, we'll say, from the people in black and white, that would be another loss that they gave up 200 yards to Virginia Tech last year.
Yeah.
But the point is you need to be able to establish the run in this game. It's going to be, and I don't think you need to run for 200 yards, but you also can't be held to $120. You have to be able to move the chains and then early downs, get the ball going, put your quarterback in 2nd and 4 and 3rd and 3 instead of a bunch of 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9, and then all of a sudden that pass rush can pin its ears back and get at you. So I think that's going to be a big key, Trev. And like I said, I think in big games like this, the strength, we talk about the weaknesses that the two teams have, but the biggest thing for me is strength on strength. Why did Notre Dame beat Georgia last year? Because they, for the most part, beat them in the trenches. Neither offense did much running the ball, but Notre Dame was able to make the plays running the ball when they needed to. They were able to move the chains when they needed to. And then they just dominated the Georgia defensive line. First half of the Penn State game, Penn State dominated in the trenches and Notre Dame fell behind 10-3. Second half of the game, I think Notre Dame won the battle in the trenches, and they came from behind and outscored Penn State. It would have been 27 to it was 27-14 in the last 32 minutes of the game.
Man,
if you count the field goal drive at the end when they're down 10-0. Why? The offensive line started playing better. First drive of the game, offensive line comes out doing its job against Ohio State, go right down the field and score. After that, mistakes, you don't get outside on a counter, which could have been a big play. You don't pass pro. In those games, you have to be able to establish your strengths. You have to play to your strengths. And then the matchups where it's strength on strength, the team that wins that battle is going to have a great opportunity to win the game. And in this instance, as you can see from the numbers, Notre Dame's really good at running the football, and Miami is last year was really good at not allowing people to run the football. I mean, again, they held 7 of their opponents last year to under 100 yards rushing. And like you can't dismiss that, you can't ignore that. And you can't just say, well, that's because they were bad at stopping the run. Stopping the pass. That's true to a degree, but they were still top 40 in yards allowed. And the numbers are what they are. And their new defensive coordinator ran a defense last year that ranked 13th in the country in rushing defense. They allowed 109.6 rushing yards per game. That was a defense that held Michigan to 155. It held Penn State to 117, held Wisconsin to 36, held Virginia Tech. The Virginia Tech team that ran for over 200 yards against Miami only went for 74 against Minnesota. So it's strength on strength. And who's going to impose their will? Who's going to control the line of scrimmage? Because, Trev, let's just say it now. It's the same thing this year as it was last year. With the running backs that Notre Dame has, you don't have to blow them off the ball 5 yards to open up run lanes. Go look at the video I put up. It's literally just get a body on a body. If you do that, then the running backs can take over.
Yep.
But Miami makes it hard to do that, and then they like to clog things up. I was able to break down some film yesterday. They want to funnel everything back inside. They asked their defensive line at Minnesota to be stout, to win at the line of scrimmage. Don't let the offensive line get a push. and then just kind of funnel everything back inside to their linebackers. Their safeties are very active getting down in the run game. They're very gap sound. They'll attack off the edges with their slots, with their linebackers, with their safeties to try to just, again, keep everything inside. And they clog up run lanes. And teams that weren't able to get a push on that defense, and not many were, struggle to run the football. That's going to be a big key. It's going to be a big key. So this part of the matchup is going to be huge, Trev.
Absolutely. Well, then Brian, let's talk a little bit then about the matchups that will impact Notre Dame's rushing offense versus Miami's rush defense. And I think with this one, you brought it up around Corey Heatherman's first year at Miami, what he did last year at Minnesota. I think the first matchup that we have to talk about is Mike Denbrock versus Corey Heatherman.
It is. I mean, I'm looking forward to this one, Trevor. This is going to be a very epic coaching matchup. We don't often talk about the coaching matchups, but I think I think in this one, a lot of it's going to come down to, you just can't line up and say our dudes are better than your dudes. Even if they are, it's not a dominant matchup in your favor either way. So Miami can't be like, remember when Clemson tried this against Notre Dame in 2022? They were like, we're just going to line up in our base defense and our dudes are better than your dudes. And Notre Dame was like, no, they're not. And they just ran all over Clemson in 2022. Just literally kept running duo over and over and over. And there was nothing that they could do to stop it. And so it's like, you can't do that, but you also don't want to get too exotic like USC tried to do last year against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame just kept gashing them for big play after big play after big play. You've got to find that sweet spot. You've got to be physical at the point of attack. You've got to, have properly called run stunts and just find weaknesses in the Notre Dame offense. And then for Mike Denbrock, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, how can we protect ourselves in the run game? So a lot of people are worried, like, okay, you're not going to be able to protect yourself the same way you did last year because you don't have Riley Leonard. I mean, there's things you can do about that. That's you run inside zone more maybe in this game than you did last year, than you will duo. Where if in inside zone you're running to the open side and you're cutting back to the tight end side. So if they want to crash off of the edge, you've got some answers. You've got some things that you can do. Well, you're not running read zone because you're running to the open side and you've got the backside protected by your tight end. If they crash off the front side of inside zone, that's going to create some big problems for them. And so that's going to, Notre Dame's going to have some answers for that. But you just also don't want to do that all day. How are you going to get to your duo stuff? You can use your receivers to protect the backside like Tommy Rees did in 2022 against Clemson. There's things you can do if they're crashing hard downhill, run some counter stuff. Iowa busted a big run on Minnesota last year where they popped a counter and bounced it outside. Those are things that you can do to create some problems against them. We saw teams that crashed the edge hard last year against Notre Dame were able to do that. And so, and getting your guys in space. So there's going to be things that Mike Denbrock can do formationally to protect edges. There's things that they can do to get numbers advantages. There's things that they can do to kind of keep the Miami linebackers from playing really aggressively downhill. And I'm curious to see how exactly they're going to do that in this opener. But that's going to be the key is Mike Denbrock. And then, of course, along with the offensive staff, Joe Rudolph and Jaywan Sider and those guys, they're going to have to come up with a really good game plan that allows them to get Miami off balance in the run game. And you're just not going to come out and run inside zone a duo all day against them. I don't think you're going to be able to do that. You've got to be able to mix it up to when you do hit those quick hitters up the middle, they're maybe not flowing as hard downhill, and that's how you can crease them. And that's what Notre Dame had success with when they did have success against some of the better rush defenses last year. It was things like that. Remember, the first two big runs that Notre Dame had against Texas A&M were outside runs. Mm-hmm. You had it was an inside zone lock, but then Jadarian Price bounces it outside once it gets through the first level. And then you get backed up. You have a 37-yard run by Jadarian Price that gets called back by a penalty, and they run outside zone. Jeremiah gets outside and breaks it for a big gain. Then all of a sudden now A&M's got to do some of this. And then second half, Notre Dame then has success going right at them. And, so those are going to have to be keys for Notre Dame running the football is like, look, you've got to find ways to get them off balance. It can't just be, here we are, we're coming at you. that's a mindset. That's not a play calling strategy. It's a mindset of, hey, here we are, we're coming at you. But that's not a play calling strategy. And so I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Mike Denbrock's going to be able to come up with in this game to try to attack this Miami defense, which is big and physical. They're built to do what Corey Weatherman wants them to do up front. He wants a big, stout, space-eating defensive line, and Miami's got a big, stout, space-eating defensive line roster.
Where I'm most excited to watch this coaching matchup is in the middle eight, the last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half. Because some of the questions that we have of, what is a Corey Heatherman Miami defense going to look like? There's going to be some of that unfolds for the coaching staff as well. They're going to be able to draw their inferences from their personnel groupings and what Corey Heatherman liked to do at Minnesota. But until you kind of get in the game and see what that's actually going to look like against your offense, the halftime adjustments for both guys, for both Denbrock and Heatherman, are going to be crucial for success in this game, the way that I'm looking at this. Because it's week one. Halftime adjustments are always a big part of any big-time game, especially early in the season when you just don't have a big enough sample size. And so this middle eight is going to be really crucial in this coaching matchup, Brian. I'm really, really excited to see that unfold on Sunday night. But as much as we can sit here and talk about the X's and O's, sometimes we also have to talk about the Jimmies and the Joes of this matchup. You know what I mean?
No doubt, man.
Next impactful area of this matchup, man, you talked about it. Miami's they have some big, stout defensive linemen that can eat up space. And for Notre Dame, a big key to their success is going to be their interior of the offensive line versus the Miami interior defensive line, or really defensive line as a whole. That's going to be a big one to watch.
Look, Notre Dame's going to have some wins on the edge. Miami's going to have some wins on the edge. I mean, the one thing that Anthony Knapp can do is run block. But Miami's they're going to crash. They're going to do different things on the edge. I think Notre Dame can hold their own there. I think the big key, like you said, Trevor, is right up the middle. Can Notre Dame's interior with Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig and Gerby Lambert, who's making his first career start as well, potentially, or Sullivan Absher, who would be making his first career start if he's starting. Both of them, could play, but it's their first career game. Can that unit perform well together? And Trev, you and I have talked about the numbers, the rushing yards per game number for Billy Schrouth. I need to find that article again, but it's something like, I think it was, like 20 yards per game higher the last 2 years when he's in the starting lineup rushing than when he's not. And when you look at Ashton Craig's numbers in his 6 starts, Notre Dame's averaging something like 250 rushing yards per game in the 6 games. And he started against, Texas A&M last year. He started against Northern Illinois. He started against Oregon State in a bowl game the year before. And so you need to say, okay, well, hopefully that can continue, and Notre Dame can go out there and be able to dominate at the point of attack like they have in games where these two guys have played together. Because if you can do that, then you'll have a lot of success. I mean, I'll just say, Ashton Craig has started 6 games, and in those 6 games, Notre Dame has rushed for over 300 yards twice. And they've rushed for over 200 yards 3 times, and in the 4th game, they went for 198. So, I got the numbers here, Trevin. In 6 games as a starting center, Notre Dame has rushed for 239 yards, 239.5 yards with Billy Schrouth at running back. And they were over 200 yards, well over 200 yards last year with Billy Schrouth at guard. I said Ashton Craig at center. But with Billy Schrouth at guard, they were over 200 yards. With him out, they were under 200 yards. And so, despite playing like Miami of Ohio and Stanford, it's not like they played like a gauntlet of the toughest teams when he was out. So you're going to have to win up the middle. You're big, you're athletic, you're powerful, and you've got to win. Simple as that. Miami's no slouches up the middle. I do have some questions about their depth up the middle. I think that's a very fair thing to question with Miami. The kid they got from Louisiana Tech is a good football player, Trev. We looked at his film and watched him play at Louisiana Tech. He's a good football player.
Yeah. David Blay.
Yeah, and they've got Justin Scott, former 5-star kid. Notre Dame fans are very familiar with him. Ahmad Moten Sr. is a big guy. He's a good-sized player, but there's questionable depth after that. But, Moten is 6'3", 325. Justin Scott, we know how big he is. He's 6'4", 298. And then David Blay is 6'4", 303. That's pretty good size up the middle.
Yeah.
But it's not I mean, this isn't Nazir Stackhouse and the Georgia front either. You've got to win this battle, and it includes getting up to the second level. That's going to be a big part of this as well, is getting a body on the Miami linebackers who are going to be flowing hard downhill. If Notre Dame can dominate, can not just win, but like win handily in the interior matchup, then they'll run the football well. If they don't, then they'll struggle to run the football. Because if this becomes a perimeter game where you've got to chase, you've got to bounce everything outside.
Yeah,
this isn't like a vintage Miami team athletically, but they're still pretty good athletically. They can run the ball pretty well. You don't necessarily want to make it. Now, you can bounce runs. If you're having success up the middle and it forces Miami to close, that's when those bounces have more success. But if you're getting whooped up the middle by the line and that's forcing you to bounce, that's when you start having some problems. So I think the interior battle is huge.
No, absolutely, Brian. I mean, you've talked about it a lot on the show. Ideally, when you're talking running back play, you don't want them making their first move 2 to 3 yards in the backfield. That's what a lapse in interior run game protection does to your offense. When Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams or a Nolan James, if we see him on Sunday, when they're having to make their first initial move a couple yards behind the line of scrimmage, that's when it's not ideal. But you go and you look at what some of the numbers are. Finally, there's some more player props out on FanDuel right now, but they think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. Right now, FanDuel has Jeremiah Love over under 79.5 rushing yards for the game, and they have Jadarian Price, which is actually a pretty enticing one, over under 41.5 rushing yards for the game. Those are the numbers on FanDuel. So those are some that I might actually be paying attention to. Might be talking about later in the week, but they do think that it's going to be somewhat of an uphill battle for them, but able to run the football to some capacity.
What's that, Trevor? 115 yards? What'd you say? What was it for Jeremiah Love? 74?
79.5.
Okay. And then Jadarian was what, 41? What'd you say? 41, yeah. 42? 42? Yeah. That's only 122 yards. So if you look at FanDuel, they're expecting Miami to hold Notre Dame in check unless they somehow think that the third-string running back is going to come in and run for 50 yards. And you're seeing a lot of people picking Miami to win this game. Lewis Riddick picked Miami. CBS Sports picked Miami. Josh Pate picked Miami. And so, once again, Notre Dame's in show-me mode. But I think if the weather's bad, this is an even more important matchup. Like, this is going to be huge for Notre Dame if the weather's bad. There's no doubt about it. But they still got to be able to throw the ball, Trev.
I was just about to say, man, let's talk about the other facet of this offense, and they will have to be able to push the ball down the field. You go and you look at what Notre Dame has done in previous big games. Yes, the performance of Riley Leonard in the season opener last year against Texas A&M had its ups and downs, but like we've highlighted before, that final possession, what was he able to do? Push the ball down the field, hit Jaden Greathouse on a big third down, hit Bo Collins on that big back shoulder. They came back against Penn State because of their ability in the pass game, and they made the Ohio State game a game because of what they were able to do in the pass game. So this is the area when I look initially, big picture at these stats, we talked run game as the foundation for Miami's defense and Notre Dame's offense. The pass game for Notre Dame and the pass defense for Miami is the big question mark heading into this matchup on Sunday night, Brian. And it's one that could dictate ultimately for either side how this game goes. And this is a big, big matchup.
Well, it's the polar opposite of what we were just talking about with the run game, because last year Notre Dame was not a great team throwing the football, and Miami wasn't a very good team when it came to stopping teams from throwing the football. And so it's the important. It's always being good at what you're good at is always the most important thing, always. But there also comes an element where it's like you also have to be able to whatever you don't do as well, you have to be able to find ways to make plays in that regard. And, a lot of the talk we've had this offseason is that, Notre Dame is going to be a different team this year. They're going to be more balanced, and that's all fine and dandy. And I fully expect Notre Dame to be more balanced this season on the whole, but will they be more balanced in week one? That's going to be the key to this game. And you look at last year, they didn't really catch their groove throwing the football till Stanford. And I would argue that had as much to do with Stanford not being very good as it did anything else. We started to see Georgia Tech that made some plays in the passing game, and Riley started to let it rip. He hit Greathouse with a back shoulder, and then of course the pass game against Navy was was pretty good in that game. And you started to kind of do some more things throwing the football after that. I mean, first 5 games, you only had 1 game over 200 yards passing. That was against Purdue. And then your next 5 games, you went for over 200 yards each game. I mean, so they got better. Will they be able to be that way in week 1 with a new quarterback and some new receivers? So that's something that we're going to have to find out and see if they're up for it. And it's going to be a lot easier if you can establish the run, Trev. But this is a game where you're going to have to take advantage of Miami defense that, when you look at it last year, was not great stopping the pass. I mean, they had very weird statistics. First 3 games of the year, they only gave up 122, 138, and 109 passing yards in each game. No touchdowns, 6 picks. Then after that, it was like, okay, they gave up 303 to South Florida, but 2 touchdowns, shut down Virginia Tech. And then Cal shreds them. 12 of 24 for 297 yards, 2 touchdowns. Give up 342 yards passing to Louisville. Give up 325 yards passing and 3 touchdowns to Duke. Then you hold Georgia Tech to 90. I shouldn't say held Georgia Tech to 99. I mean, part of the reason that was just a freaking weird game. But, I mean, Georgia Tech was able to run all over them. That's why. Georgia Tech didn't need to throw the ball. They ran for 271 yards. They didn't have to throw the ball that game. Shut down Wake Forest is a bad pass tag. Then Syracuse goes for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns on him, and then Iowa State goes for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns on him in the bowl game. And you say, well, what about at Minnesota? Well, again, started off great. Minnesota's first 5 games of last year, Minnesota's defense gave up 105, 117, 114, 62, and 86 yards in 5 games, Trev. They picked off 8 passes and only had 1 interception. Problem is, after that, they started kind of having a little less success. UCLA went for 293. Maryland went for 323. Illinois went for 226. Rutgers went for 240. Penn State went for 244, 8.7 per catch. And, they were able to have some success against them. So this is an area where you've got a brand new secondary, bunch of guys playing together. You're going to have to be able to find some success against them. And they're good players, but I don't know that they're better than what they were last year. The thing that we're going to have to find out is, okay, that's fine. Being better than what you were last year in the secondary isn't exactly like this this call to arms of, okay, now you're somehow a great player.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a different story. And Notre Dame's gonna have to test that and put that, and see what they are. Zechariah Poyser's a good football player. He was a good football player at Jacksonville State, but this isn't Jacksonville State. This is a different animal. So I'm very curious to see how Notre Dame is able to go at this secondary, which is a new look secondary, and be able to have some advantages and take advantages of what is going to be a unit learning a new defense for the first time. And then can you protect the quarterback? What's the weather going to be like? Can your young quarterback handle the environment? There's all these things that you got to look into. At the end of the day, TJ Carr is going to have to make some throws in this game. Receivers going to have to make some catches in this game. I don't see a world in which you just come out and do what Georgia Tech did to them last year. It'd be nice. Okay, this is going to be a long year for people that play Notre Dame. But even in the rain, you're going to have to make some throws. That's just the reality of it. And the question is, can you do that or not? Last year, there were times Notre Dame didn't start making throws until it was too late. You needed to. You had to. You're behind. You want to make sure you're hitting those plays early in this game.
Yeah, what takes the day? Is it Notre Dame's ability to push the ball down the field or Miami's ability to limit big plays? I think sometimes some of these stats can be a little bit misleading because, again, it's tough. We're taking Miami's 2024 stats. They have a new look secondary and they have a new defensive coordinator. But we're talking about a defense last year that ranked outside of the top 40, really outside of the top 50 in yards per completion. And we're talking about Notre Dame's pass offense that ranked outside of the top 115 in the country in yards per completion. You talked about what they gave up against Cal. Look, Fernando Mendoza, who's now the starting quarterback at Indiana, last year when he was at Cal, he threw for 285 yards against this defense and completed 11 passes. Will Miami's defense be able to limit the big plays? Flip side of that coin, is Notre Dame's offense going to be able to push the ball down the field and make plays? Brian, you hit on something really key. Not when the game calls for it. because last season what we saw, the passing offense was just kind of especially in the postseason, well, might as well air it out now, because if we don't, probably going to lose. Penn State, Ohio State. Will it be a viable part of the offense? Will it be an early go-to option, or is it going to be, 20-7 going into the fourth quarter? It's time to start pushing the ball down the field. So I think that's going to be interesting.
But this is why I'm excited about this team, though, Trev, is because this is what you brought Malachi Fields in for. This is what you brought Will Pauling in for. This is why you're going with C.J. Carr as your starting quarterback. This is why you recruited C.J. Carr in the first place. It was not to come in and hand the ball off 75 times a game. It was to give the offense an element of, we can hurt you this way just as well as we can hurt you that way. That's what you brought. That's why you recruited C.J. Carr. That's why you recruited the receivers you've brought into your program, high school and in college, the transfers. So, if you're going to go and be a blocking team that just is going to run the ball all day, I don't understand why you brought in the guys you brought in. That quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Yes, you want to run the football, but I hope that one of the lessons Marcus Freeman learned last year is you can't just ground and pound teams into oblivion in the postseason. Can't. You've got to be balanced. And that's what I'm excited about. Now it's just kind of show me mode, like you've talked about. But you want to make some plays in the rain, go get a 6'4", 225-pound athletic receiver that jumps 38 inches, which is what Malachi Fields, I believe, is what Bruce Feldman said his vertical was when he was on the freaks list last year. Yep. Go get a guy like that. Go get a guy like Jaden Greathouse, who's got tremendous ball skills. It's great to have a 6'7" tight end when you're playing in this type of situations. I remember Brady Quinn throwing some balls up to John Carlson in 2006 that he just went up and did his go-go gadget arms thing and brought the ball in. You look, think about that game in 2006, though. Think about it. It was pouring down rain the whole game. Brady Quinn still had to make some throws. I mean, you got to make some throws. You got to make some catches. And so that's going to be a big part of this, is being able to throw the football. But I'm excited about it. I'm starting to get like the nervousness of not knowing, of not having evidence of it, because all of this is so new together. But you got to remind yourself of all the excitement that you get into the game of. This is why we were so excited that they brought in Malachi Fields. This is why we were so excited that they added Will Pauling, and this is why we're so excited that they started C.J. Carr, because they have that ability to make you a more balanced offense. And you want to go on the road and beat a team like Miami. Yes, you got to be able to run the football, but you've got to be able to throw the football too. I've said it a million times. I'll say it till I die, and no one's going to tell me otherwise. If Brandon Wimbush hits a couple of those early passes, including that poster out to Equinemi St. Brown, who's open for a touchdown on drive one, that game looks way different. And he didn't. And my evidence is, go look at the USC game. He hits a couple early deep balls, hits EQ on a post route, hits a back shoulder touchdown to Kevin Steffers, and all of a sudden USC's like, well, I don't know how to defend you now, because we were loading the box, shutting down your run game. They completely shut down the run game on the first drive, and they come out with a reverse, and Brandon hits a couple big shots down the field, and all of a sudden, boom, USC's like, well, what do we do now? Because now they're throwing on us too. And then that just opened up the run game, and they ran all over them. So you've got to be able to hit some throws. Do I think C.J. Carr needs to go out there and throw for 350 yards against them? No. But you've got to make some plays in the throwing game if you're going to beat them. That could be screen game, is to a degree, some of that. But I'm more so thinking you've got to be able to get the ball down the field to some degree and make some plays, whether it's stops, digs, ends, as well as the slot fades and the posts and the deep shots. This isn't just about dropping back, throwing bombs. This is about being able to move the chains with the football, being able to hit a couple 20, 25 yarders like we saw in the spring game. You're going to need some of that stuff when it matters. And if you can get some of that, then this offense should be able to cook a little bit.
We've talked a lot about the skilled positions: Eli Raridan, Malachi Fields, Jaden Greathouse, C.J. Carr. And a lot of that sounds extremely promising. But Brian, getting into the matchups that will impact this area, It's going to be really difficult to get the ball into the hands of your playmakers if they don't handle business up front.
Yeah.
And our biggest matchup that we're going to talk about here in concerns of Notre Dame's pass game versus Miami's pass defense is actually along the trenches. Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp are going to have their hands full with Ruben Bain. And some of his stats kind of took a step back in 24 because he was hurt for about 4 games. But in 2023, talking about somebody who generated 45 total pressures on the season as a freshman and was still productive in the games that he did play in 2024, we've seen Notre Dame's pass offense stall because of edge pressure throughout 2024. And I know that some things schematically are different. Notre Dame has a different quarterback and Miami has a different defensive coordinator, but Ruben Bain is still lining up on the edge, and Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp are still lining up at tackle. This is going to be a huge matchup for both sides, Brian, on Sunday night.
Oh, absolutely, Trev. Incredibly important part of the matchup. And when you look at the Notre Dame offensive line last year, I mean, they were pretty hit or miss last season. There were times they struggled, and there were times they performed well. You know, I thought Emil Wagner played really well in the opener against Texas A&M. I thought Anthony Knapp, for the most part, held his own. He gave up a sack in that game and 4 pressures, but overall, I thought held his own pretty well in that game. The interior did a great job of protecting the quarterback. You know, so there were times last year, you know, you could argue that the best game that Anthony Knapp played last year was in pass pro was against Louisville. You know, Emil Wagner struggled in that game, but Anthony Knapp played really well in that game in pass pro. And so then there was other times when they would look good and other times when they didn't look good. It was very inconsistent. But against a guy like Ruben Bain, you've got to bring your A game. I mean, he's out to prove last year was a fluke. He's out there to prove that, you know, he's a first-round draft pick, and a game like Notre Dame is that spotlight kind of game for him. You've got to keep him in check. You're not going to dominate him. That's not what you're looking for here. You just got to keep him from dominating. Just get a body on him. And if he does get into the backfield, keep a body on him. Because if a defensive lineman gets through and he pushes you around, but you stay engaged on him, unless the quarterback has no escapability skills whatsoever, he can manipulate around that guy. And that's going to be the key is you've got to hold your own. Now, they're both bigger. They're both more experienced and getting their own fair share of preseason love. You've got to go show that it's earned. So if Notre Dame wins this game and CJ Carr has a good first start for Notre Dame, we're going to look back at this matchup and be like, whew, all right, this is going to be good. And then if you're Mike Denbrock, you also have to have a plan to help those guys out at times. You know, like and this is something that if I'm Mike Denbrock, I'm telling my coaches up in the box to be watching very early on. What is Ruben Bain doing backside of run game? What, is he crashing hard? Like, is he coming real level and trying to play the backside, or is he staying like contained? Because those are things you can do to kind of take him out of the game a little bit as well. So if he's being real aggressive coming off the edge, you can screen him, you can bootleg around him, you know, get him thinking like, hey, I can't be this aggressive. You know, there might be a couple times you're just like, hey, let's let him drive Anthony Knapp into the backfield, and then we're going to sneak a tunnel screen right behind him. He's thinking like, I did something really good, and then you're bringing something behind him. There's things you can do to slow him down where it's not just, hey, Knapp, hey, Wagner, good luck, guys. You know, give them a little bit of help as well. And that's where Mike Denbrock can have an impact. But at the end of the day, you can only do so much as a coach. It just comes down to those dudes on the edge got to go handle their business. Simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of dudes, let's kick this conversation out to the outside. And, you know, we talked about Notre Dame having to win some of their one-on-ones. You know, some of their coaches have gone on record to say, hey, look, sometimes when you got a guy like Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse, if they're covered one-on-one, give them a chance. Give them a shot. They're going to have to win their one-on-one matchups over the course of this game. Because, yes, there are some question marks around Miami's secondary, but they do have some talented players. You know, O.J. Frederick is their only returning starter coming back in the secondary that started the majority of the 2024 season. He had a rough game against Syracuse, and I think he got a little bit of the Christian Gray treatment. You know, in that game against Syracuse, I mean, he was penalized 3 times. He gave up 100 receiving yards on 4 receptions. He gave up a touchdown, but for the most part over the course of the season, he was probably their most steady player in the secondary. He's targeted 38 times, only gave up 14 receptions. Majority of the yards came against Syracuse. Notre Dame is going to have to win their one-on-one matchups at receiver. starting from the snap at line of scrimmage. But that is going to be a battle that is going to really sway who walks away from this. Okay, Notre Dame's receiving core won the matchup, or Miami secondary is what some of their fans believe it to be already in week one.
Well, it is, that is kind of interesting, but that's part of the unknown, right? Like Miami fans are having the same excitement about their poor secondary becoming good because of all the transfers. Well, I mean, obviously Notre Dame fans don't know what that's like when it comes to the secondary, but we know that's like when it comes to wide receivers. I mean, isn't that kind of part of where our excitement comes from as Notre Dame fans? Is like, hey, we got Malachi Fields now. We've got this guy now, and we're going to be a lot better because we've got this guy. Well, that's kind of where Miami is right now when it comes to, the guys they got, getting Xavier Lucas out of the portal from Wisconsin. And no matter how you feel about how they went about doing it, but that's what they did. He had a solid freshman year last year in the Big Ten. Held teams to less than 200 yards passing on the year. Only played 200 pass snaps, but still had a good freshman season. He's a big, tall, 6'2", 200-pound kid, good football player. He's a guy that they're excited about. And you look at Charles Brantley, who transferred in this offseason as well. You look at kind of what he did last season in the secondary at Michigan State. Solid football player, did some good things. Held opponents to less than 40% completion rate, which is a pretty good season. Didn't allow a touchdown last year. So, he was very successful for Michigan State last year. And that's a guy they're excited about. Ethan O'Connor's a player that they got in from, I believe, Washington State. I think Ethan O'Connor played from, am I correct on that? He was at Washington State last season. He's a guy that's also long. He's 6'1", 6'2". He's a pretty good football player as well. I don't know that he's on the same level as Brantley and Lucas. When we talked transfers way back in the day, I said that Brantley was one of the ones that I really liked. It was a very sneaky, underrated pickup. So, they got good players. There's no doubt. They have a more talented secondary this year than they had last year. But but Notre Dame, I would argue, has a more talented receiver this year than they had last year. Which one of those wins the day? And like you said, Trev, that's going to be a big key. Can Malachi Fields make more plays than Charles Brantley and Xavier Lucas and Ethan O'Connor and O.J. Frederick? Can Jaden Greathouse prove Marcus Freeman correct when he said if he's one-on-one, he's open? Like, can he go out there and make those plays? That's going to be a big part of this game. And there's a player in particular that I think could have a really big impact on this, Trev, and that's Eli Raridan. And I know Trevor's going to be super excited when I bring this up, but this is one that I think it could be a huge matchup because this is one where I look at it and I say, if you can have some success with Eli Raridan throwing the football, especially off play action, then Miami has to start thinking twice about how aggressively they want to bring down their safeties and linebackers. Say, okay, if you're going to really crash your safeties downhill and start bringing them off the edge, you better hope we're not running a play action seam route to our 6'7", 4'5", 40 tight end who was on the freaks list. I mean, this thing is Notre Dame's got 3 kids and 3 pass catchers that were on Bruce Feldman's freaks list the last 2 years. Use them. Go make plays. That's going to be a big part of it. But I really am looking forward to seeing what Eli Raridan can do, because if you can have success there, that not only impacts your ability to throw the football, but if your tight end's eating you up a little bit, whether it's the downfield stuff, it's the overs, it's the third down catches, it's also the under screens. If they're crashing the backside and you're slipping that little screen pass out behind it, Eli Raridan, and you've got 2 blockers and Eli against 2 DBs, all right, let's cook there. I mean, there's things that he can do that really can hurt Miami with what they're trying to do in the run game also. And that's why I think a big early game from Eli Raridan could be impactful for Notre Dame as well. That's a matchup that I'm absolutely looking for in this game, Trev. Seeing him against the linebackers. And, you had some stats that you pointed out to me before the show, about the Miami linebackers were vulnerable in the pass game, and so were the safeties. I think that's they're going to have to find ways to take advantage of that in this game. If they can do that, then I'm excited about what they can do.
Well, couldn't agree more. I mean, they're getting Mohamed Toure back from injury. Unfortunately, he missed his 2024 season against Rutgers, or while he was at Rutgers with a torn ACL. A great run-stopping linebacker, 92 tackles in 2023, great at block destruction, and he's very strong at the point of attack. But he's somebody that was somewhat of a liability in coverage. He was targeted 31 times. He allowed 23 receptions, gave up 3 touchdowns. I know another one of Miami's linebackers last season who's no longer there, but he also gave up 3 receiving touchdowns last year. Look, Eli Raridon's a mismatch nightmare. Like you said, not a lot of players on defense across the country, this isn't specific to Miami, is going to have a lot of success covering a 6'7", 252-pound tight end that can run in the 4.5s. That's going to be a difficult task for anybody. And I would make the argument that some of the players who can defend that on a play-by-play basis might be on the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame. And so there's going to be a lot of difficult matchups for Notre Dame in this game. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. The tight end matchup is going to be one to watch. That's for sure. Brian, let's kind of take a step back and let's look at this more big picture for Notre Dame's offense. When we talk about what we need to see from them, we talked about the matchups, but top 10 matchup under the lights, potential elements in play with the rain. What do you need to see from Notre Dame's offense on Sunday?
We'll get into some of the keys like turnovers and starting fast and all that tomorrow. But it really comes down to play with poise is going to be a big one. When you're going to an environment, it's going to be loud. There's going to be a lot of inebriated, excited fans ready to start the season and who hate Notre Dame. And it's going to be a wild environment. Miami's players are going to be doing a lot of this. And can you be intense, be fired up, be ready, but be poised? Chris Zorich talked about how, that got to them a little bit in '89, some of the stuff that was said before the game and how the head coach handled it and different things like that and how impactful that was on their mindset going into the game. So be intense, be fired up, but be poised and be disciplined with how you play the game. But then the biggest thing is with this offense, what I really want to see, just big picture, Trevor, is I want to see them impose their will on Miami. Don't be timid. Don't be like, let's just pick our spots. I don't want to see the Marcus Freeman mindset from Miami, Ohio last year. Speaking of Miami's, where it's like, we're going to take what they give us. And, and that's why you only scored 28 points against a MAC team. And you needed a 50-yard touchdown run in the fourth quarter to even get to that. I don't want to see that. I want to see you be aggressive. Now, aggressive doesn't mean you're dropping back throwing post routes and goes on the first couple plays of the game. Sometimes being aggressive can be a misdirection screen pass. Just do things where you're taking the fight to them. You can be aggressive running the football. You can be aggressive with play action. You can be aggressive with your screen game. You can be aggressive in a lot of different ways. It's a mindset of we're taking the fight to them. That's what Notre Dame has to see. If it's just picking your spots and letting the game come to you and all that other kind of stuff, like we've seen from Notre Dame early in the season in recent years under Marcus Freeman, which is why the offense has tended not to start real fast when they play quality teams in his tenure. It's a lot of it's that. It's just you're not coming out aggressive, especially against the better teams. I want to see them be aggressive and look to take the fight to Miami. And if you can do that, then, aggressive can be a reverse that's going to their aggression, and so that's what I want to see, Trev. It's impose your will, take the fight to them, and be the aggressors in every way possible. That's what I want to see from this offense. And just team in general, but especially, I think the defense will do that. Yeah, I definitely want to see that from the offense as well.
Well, I'm with you, man. Look, aggressive doesn't have to be Hail Marys every other play. Aggressive can be switching up your tempo on offense. You need to show signs that you are willing to take the fight to Miami. Get creative with your play calling. Move, change your rate of play, change your tempo, adjust how you attack different drives. Absolutely. Also, take shots down the field. It's a combination of everything. But I'm with you. Don't be stagnant. Don't take what the defense gives you in certain situations like this, which is a fear starting a redshirt freshman quarterback on the road in this type of matchup. But no, be the aggressors. Historically, Notre Dame, that's what's plagued them in big games. Even take the Marcus Freeman era out of it. One of the reasons why Notre Dame lost 41-8 the last time they were down in the stadium is, let's try to run the ball and let's take what the defense gives us. We don't need to force anything that we don't have to. And then the final score was 41-8. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of other factors that also went into that, but offensive identity is huge in big games like this. Be who you were against Indiana. Be who you were against Georgia. Be aggressive. Be who you were the second half against Penn State. And so that's one of the things that I think I'm could not agree more with that. Biggest thing I need to see is be the aggressors, Brian. I'm with you. You completely. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show, but don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to talk about Notre Dame's defense against Miami's offense. But before we get there, you guys know what to do. Make sure that you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel and that notification bell is started so you know whenever we go live here. The best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We are 4 days away from kickoff. We are rolling out a lot of awesome exclusive content for our premium message board members in the Champions Lounge. Brian has a whole series of video breakdowns coming out about Notre Dame's run game. We're going to be breaking down, what we expect to see this week from
We'll have some
Miami's
pass game
defense.
stuff coming up today.
Yes, absolutely. So it's all the more reason to subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, we're going to be talking Notre Dame's defense versus Miami's offense. Now, again, keys to victory, key players, things like that is going to be on tomorrow's show. Today, what we're doing is we're looking at just these matchups as a whole, looking at it from the Notre Dame perspective and the Miami perspective. And when we start talking about this is a very intriguing matchup, Brian, because we're talking about opposed to what we said on the offensive side of the ball, we're talking about the two perceived strengths of what these teams were in 2024. Last season, we know how high-powered of an offense Miami had. And obviously last year, we know how high-powered and how strong of a defense Notre Dame had. And so I know we're getting ready to dive into the stats here in just a minute, but when we look at this matchup as a whole, these are the two perceived strengths of each team going into this matchup.
You're spot on. It's the polar opposite of what we just talked about on the other side of the ball, where there's questions on offense and there's questions on defense. The only questions on in this matchup are some new faces, but the expectation is that these are still going to be two dominant units. And when you look at the numbers from last year, Trev, it speaks to that. Notre Dame's offense last year, for example, let's pull those numbers back up. This is the Notre Dame offense from last year, just to make a point. They did well scoring. They finished in the top 10 in the country in scoring, but they were 55th in yards, 27th in yards per play, 101st in passing yards. They did what they needed to do. Thanks to the defense and special teams, they were able to get the job done. I think Notre Dame had 5 defensive touchdowns last year. So that played a role in it. They were a big play offense. They weren't a consistent offense. When you look at it, and then Miami's defense just struggled almost all year. When you look at this matchup, Trev, this is 2 top 5 units. I mean, there's a lot of single-digit rankings for both of these teams. There's a lot of top 10 to 15 rankings for both of these teams. Notre Dame ranked 4th in the country in scoring last year. Miami is ranked number 1. Miami also ranked number 1 in yards per game, yards per play, 7th in plays of 30 yards or more. Notre Dame ranked 11th in those two categories, yards and yards per play. Their rush offense was good. Notre Dame's rush defense was not as great. We'll talk about that, but it's this next one that you get into it. They had the number 3 pass offense in the country, 3rd in yards per attempt. Notre Dame had the number 4 pass offense in the country, 6th in yards per attempt. Miami had the number 4 ranked pass offense in the country in quarterback rating. Notre Dame had the number 1 pass defense in the country in terms of quarterback rating. Miami had the number 1 third down offense in the country. Notre Dame had the number 12 third down defense in the country. Miami has the number 8 red zone offense in the country. Notre Dame has the number 18 red zone defense in the country. I mean, this is 2 elite units going against each other, but also some elite units that have some new faces. Obviously, for Notre Dame, it's you lose Chris Ash. No more Riley Mills. No more Howard Cross. No more Jack Kaiser. They're now in the NFL. Riley Mills, obviously, Notre Dame didn't have him against Georgia, Penn State, or Ohio State, so they've had to kind of learn to live without him. You're getting some new faces back. Boubacar Traore's back. That's obviously big. You've got some newcomers, a couple transfers that you expect to help. Jared Dawson from Louisville, and you've obviously got Elijah Hughes at D tackle, and of course Devontae Smith in the nickel. But Trev, when you look at this matchup, they're still expected to be a dominant defense. And then when you look on the other side of the ball, we've talked a lot about all the things that Miami lost last year, and there's no doubt. I don't think there's any world in which Miami's the number 1 ranked defense and offense in the country in scoring and yards per game this year. I just don't see it happening. But what they're not going to be is like 50th either. Like they're still going to be really good. Shannon Dawson's still back. He's still there. Like they just weren't out there just making stuff up and just playing a bunch of bad teams and then just padded a bunch of stats. I mean, if you look at Miami last year, we've talked about teams in the past, Trev, where like, yeah, they ranked for a lot of yards, but that's because they had like 650 against this bad team and went for 212 against this good team. Miami last year, 5 yards per game, 529, 549, 750, 592, 508, 575, 538, 445, 526, 436, 508, 503, 524. Their lowest game of the season was 37 more yards than what Notre Dame averaged on the season last year on offense. Did they lose a lot? Yeah, they lost a lot. But they've also got some talented players coming back, and they, like Notre Dame, got some new transfers in that can play. So I'm excited to see this. Like, we're going to know right away how good Notre Dame is on defense. We're going to know right away if Chris Ash knows what he's doing as the defensive coordinator, because you're going against a well-coached unit. Shannon Dawson's a really good football coach. Alex Mirabel is considered one of the better offensive line coaches in the business. Like, this is going to be a great matchup between two really, really good units. And whichever one can win this battle is going to have a huge impact on who's going to win this football game. I can't wait for this. Where the other one is like a lot of negatives and like, I don't know about this and I don't know about that. This matchup is like, they're really good at this. They're really good at that. Who's going to impose their will on who? I cannot wait for this. Cannot wait for this matchup.
Excuse me. I mean, look, man, it's shades of the 88 game. We all know at this point I wasn't alive to see it. But I've listened to enough stories. I watched the entire interview that you had with Chris Zorich earlier this week, which was a fantastic watch. I've talked to my dad about that game. This is kind of the storyline. You know, it's the high-powered Miami offense, and, you know, they're out in the shotgun and they're throwing it all over the yard versus, you know, the Notre Dame defense, the stout Notre Dame, hard-hitting, athletic, long defense. Still shades of that, which I can appreciate. I didn't get to watch a game, but one of the reasons why I love being a Notre Dame fan is I appreciate the history and the tradition that also goes into the program. So it's cool to see that resurface itself in another top 10 matchup in a setting that Notre Dame hasn't won in their last 6 trips down to Hard Rock Stadium. I think that adds to it. But this is the side of the ball that is going to be really, really fun to watch, regardless of how it goes. Now, look, I'm with you. I think you highlighted something that's extremely important. Yes, I agree with you. I don't think Miami is going to be the number one offense in points per game or yards per play this year. But to your point, they're not going to be 50th. They're still going to be a top, I don't want to put a number on it, but it wouldn't shock me in the slightest if they were still a top 25 offense in all 3 of those categories this upcoming season. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest. The biggest question is how ready will either side of the ball be in game 1? Miami has a lot of talent. Notre Dame obviously has a lot of talent on defense. But how ready will they be with a new defensive coordinator in the first game of the season? Miami lost their top 6 pass catchers from a year ago. They have a lot of talent at those positions. Are they going to look like November version of them on August 31st? I don't know. That's the question. But the awesome thing about this conversation, Brian, is the question isn't around the ability or the talent. And that's why I think you could see some fireworks from this side of the ball, respectively, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, look, you don't just replace the kind of production that they replace in just game 1. You're just going for 40 again. I don't think that's realistic, but I also think it's unrealistic to think they're going to be so disjointed that they only score 6. Like, for Notre Dame, it's like, okay, it's going to be somewhere in the middle, but is it closer to the 6 or closer to the 35? You know, that's going to be the matchup in this game. But, you know, yeah, you're losing the number 1 overall draft pick at quarterback and Cam Ward. That's not all you lost. You lost your top 6 leading pass catchers if you also include the running back. But there are things Miami brings back that are going to be strengths that they're going to build around that they were good at last year. And you can say, well, you know, they lost their 1,000-yard running back, but they bring back a talented backfield still. But at the end of the day, what made this team so good last year was their balance. And for Notre Dame, you're going to have to stop something. You know, and what is that something that you're going to stop? I think part of that's going to be dependent upon the weather. You know, if it's wet but not raining, then, you know, you treat that no different than if it's wet and still currently raining. and then the severity in which it's doing that. But when Miami was at their best last year, in my opinion, Trevor, it's when they were able to establish balance. They didn't always do that, but they were pretty good at doing that. And, you look at some of the big games they won. Obviously, they were able to throw the ball around a lot and run the ball. They, when they beat Louisville, I think, which I still say is the best one they had all year, they ran for 219 yards and passed for 319 yards. That's a huge win. Look at some of the games they didn't play as well. In the games they struggled a little bit. Lose to Georgia Tech, only ran for 88 yards. Passed for 348, but he only ran for 88. Game you lost to Syracuse, they passed for 349, but they only rushed for 154. They weren't quite as balanced in that game as they were in some other games against Syracuse and Georgia Tech. So I think that's going to be part of it. Is can you establish some balance and effectively do both? And for Notre Dame, it's like we're not going to let them do both. We're going to shut something down. They're going to have to beat us doing insert thing that you're okay with them trying to beat you with. And that's, I think, going to be a big part of the game plan for Chris Ash, is determining what that is. There's two ways to look at it, Trevor. One is don't let them run the ball, make them beat you throwing the ball. That makes a lot of sense because it is a bunch of new receivers. It is a new quarterback. You've got a great pass defense. The other side could be, look, we're going to shut down the run game and make them run the ball, but because we're shutting down the run game on the pass game on the perimeter, we can funnel everything back inside. Okay, maybe that might work. But you've got to try to take something away, in my opinion. Make them beat you with things that aren't what they do best. I think big picture, that's the key. And when you start with that, that's where you say, okay, now we got to talk about the pass game. Because this is the ultimate good on good in this game. If you look at last year and what you expect Miami to be this season, I do think that we can comfortably say that that's where the matchup gets interesting.
Well, I think what's interesting about this as a whole is the contrast between Notre Dame's offense and Miami's defense versus Notre Dame's defense and Miami's offense. It was known that Miami's rush defense and Notre Dame's rushing offense was kind of the highlight of these two. But you kind of look at this on the inverse. And the pass game for Miami last year, when you take their stats into consideration, it absolutely is the best on best. But I would make the argument that their rushing offense is more of the known this season than what their passing offense is going to be because of all the moving pieces. Whereas Notre Dame's passing defense is the known commodity for this defense. So what takes the day? Is Notre Dame's pass defense consistent despite losing somebody like Xavier Watts? And yes, they didn't have him in the postseason in the second half of the regular season, but even having a veteran presence like Ben Morrison with you on the sidelines with you, still one of your team captains, he is also no longer with the program. What type of impact does that have? On the flip side of the coin, you take a look at Miami. What happens when you don't have the number one overall draft pick at quarterback anymore, and you have to replace your top 5 pass catchers, not counting the running back? So that's what makes this conversation a little bit different. But yes, on paper, it is strength on strength. But when we start talking about this pass game matchup, they were both elite. Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator, helped out by the fact that their pass game coordinator, Mike Mickens, is back in his role, commanding that side of the ball. So Mike Mickens versus Shannon Dawson, definitely a very interesting battle here going on. It's going to be one that's going to be really fun to watch, man.
Yeah, it is because, I mean, that's the constant for the pass game for Miami is Shannon Dawson as the offensive coordinator. You say, okay, the new quarterback, new receivers, and all, and I get all that, but the constant is you are in the same system, whereas Notre Dame is having to learn a new system. And I've had the pleasure of sitting in some meetings with Shannon Dawson back in the day when he was coaching, at West Virginia, and sitting in some coaches' clinics and listening to him talk and about the game. He's a pretty sharp guy. And, he's now going into his third year at Miami. Third year as their offensive coordinator. What kind of success is he going to have? And last year he had a brand new quarterback, but a lot of the other stuff that they had last year was returning. It wasn't brand new on offense, at least in the pass game wise. Their best running back was new, Damian Martinez, but a lot of it was not new. And so there's schematically, Trev, at least there's going to be some constants. And yes, there's a lot of new players, but we've talked about this. They're walking into a situation where there are known commodities that can kind of bring them along in that regard. And I think that's going to be a big part of it. But look, Shannon Dawson had an immediate impact at Miami when he came over. They went from scoring 23 points a game in 2022, his without him to his first year, jumping up to 31 and then up to 43. And so, they're going to go to football. They're going to come at Notre Dame on the perimeter. They're going to try to find weaknesses, and Mike Mickens and Chris Ash are going to have answers for that. But I think this is going to be a great matchup. And we're going there's a lot to look at. How good is Miami going to be with Carson Beck compared to Cam Ward? Very different quarterbacks. Cam Ward played a lot of street ball, which you and I have talked about. I have an affinity for that. But it's different. It's not always structured. He was fine, and look, he wasn't number 1 overall draft pick because he only plays street ball. You don't draft a guy number 1 overall if that's the reason. But that's something he was really good at. So he could, when things broke down or if he didn't like looks, he would just run around until somebody got open. Carson Beck is much more of a from structure guy. He's going to sit in the pocket and run the offense and pick you apart, ideally, within structure. Well, is Miami going to be as effective that way? Will they be more effective that way? Will they be less effective that way? That's an answer we don't know. Will Chris Ash be able to design a game plan and call a game and make adjustments the same way that Al Golden did in the past game? I don't know. He's going to have some very talented players to rely on. That's for darn sure. But Miami's got a very inexperienced receiving core in some areas and new faces in other areas, but they don't lack talent. C.J. Daniels, the transfer from LSU, is a good football player. I know things didn't work out well for him at LSU, but he was a very good football player at Liberty a couple years ago. You look at JoJo Trader, who's a very talented young player. Didn't do a whole lot last year, but, Will Fuller only had 6 catches his freshman year, and then he went out the next year and had 1,000 yards. You got to make sure that if he's going to have that kind of breakout, it's not in week 1. That's going to be the key for Notre Dame. So I think this part of the matchup, Trev, this pass game matchup is going to be key because I believe, and again, this is my opinion. We don't know this because it's just what I think, having observed the team and who they have. I actually think Notre Dame's going to be better prepared to slow down or stop the run this season without having to overcommit resources. I just think that the structure of the lineup, you have fewer guys that are pass rushers first, run defender second, which is what you had last year at D tackle. Your 2 D tackles, their best attribute, both of them, was rushing the passer. Now you look at it and say, well, if Jason Onye's in there as a starter, if Gabriel Rubio's in there, their primary strength is stopping the run. Jared Dawson's more of a pass rusher. Donovan Heinisch is more of a pass rusher. Elijah Hughes is more of a run stopper. There's more variety there inside. And then I think with the linebackers being a year older, I think that's going to play a big part of this too. So I think this matchup is going to be good to where that's going to be important, because if you can do that, then you don't have to overcommit resources to the run game, which then allows your pass game to not just be in man coverage all day. Because I'll be honest, I get a little nervous about that on a wet field. It's like one slip and then all of a sudden, boom, a guy catches it and he's upfield for a big play. That makes me a little bit nervous when you're just playing cover 1 all the time on a wet field, more so than it does on a dry field. But I think this is going to be an epic matchup, Trev. And there's 2 aspects of it. There's the coverage aspect of it, and then there's the pass pro aspect of it. And they're very different battles, but also very intriguing and very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Notre Dame last year, specifically off the edge, was not a consistent group at generating pressure on the quarterback. And there were times where, against Georgia, there were times where the edge rush, and really the pass rush as a whole, was pretty good. You look at it, you had R.J. Obensack and Junior Tuialamaka generating pressure. And then you have other games where it's like, yeah, I know they played because I saw them out there. But if we're just looking at overall impact on the game, it was They're going to be tested. You're going up against Francis Maui-Noa, who's one of the most recognized offensive tackles returning in college football this upcoming season. 26 career starts under his belt. Started 13 games in each of the last 2 seasons. 6'6", 315 guy that people are projecting to be a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick. So they're going to have to get some pressure. That matchup between the Notre Dame edge rushers and the Miami tackles is really, really intriguing. And that's one that, if you're Notre Dame, you have to be able to generate some sort of pressure off the edge because of what you were talking about, the diversity in the interior of the defensive line. The bright side is against the run, you're going to have more stout interior players against the run across the board. The caveat to that is in the pass game, you can't rely on both of Riley Mills and Howard Cross to generate pressure right up the A-gap anymore. The edge rushers are going to have to bring it. And if you're Miami, Francis Maui-Noa, you got to hope that he lives up to what his reputation is. He had a very impressive jump. He allowed 8 hits plus sacks on the quarterback in 2023. He only allowed 2 in last season. It's a good jump. Can he build on that? And then for Markel Bell, he was in and out of the lineup. He was not necessarily handed the job at the start of 2024, but he was slated to be their starter. And due to inconsistent play, they started rotating him with Jalen Rivers. Can he make that jump? That could be something that we talk about tomorrow in the keys to victory. But as far as today's show goes, Notre Dame is going to have to do everything that they can to generate pressure with their front four. I want to be very clear on that. And a lot of Notre Dame fans they've grown accustomed to just seeing linebackers blitzed all the time. Look, this is a different scheme. Chris Ash is not Al Golden. He may do that. I'm talking about something that is an unknown here. But ideally, if you're able to generate pressure with your front four, especially off of the edge, it's going to bode really well for Notre Dame. That's for sure.
Yeah, the pass rush is going to be key. And you look, it can't just be beating Markel Bell, who part of the issue he had last year, he's making the transition from JUCO to Power 4 football. It's a very different animal. Now he's got a year under his belt. He's got a whole spring and summer and fall camp going against the Miami pass rushers, Ruben Bain and those kind of guys. We keep talking about how, going against Boubacar and Bryce Young and Burnham and Tuihalamaka and Batoho is going to make Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner better. Well, that's also true for the Miami offensive linemen going against Ruben Bain and the rest of that group. And so you're going to have your hands full, but you've got to be able to win. That's the key. You've got to be able to win on the edge and have some success in this matchup, Trev, because when you look at it at the end of the day, it's easy to it's not easy to do, but it's very easy to point to the keys for Notre Dame. And one thing that we'll spend time talking about tomorrow is you can't let Carson Beck sit back all day and have a lot of time to throw the football. He'll pick you apart. He will. You've got to pressure him. And that's going to be a big part of this. And it starts with that, like you said, that matchup up front. And it's not just on the edge, but then you've also got to win up the middle. Jason Onye needs to be in the game, what we all hope he could be. Jared Dawson struggled against Miami last year. As good as he was against Notre Dame, he was that bad against Miami. This is maybe a little bit of a redemption opportunity for him. And they have a very weird offensive line, Trev, because like their right guard, Ines Cooper's listed at, I think it's like 6'6", 350, something like that. Yeah, and then their interior guys, you look at Ryan Rodriguez, who's projected to be their left tackle. He's 6'3", or 6'2", I think like 275, something like that. Like he's not a very big guy. And then James Carpenter's like 6'3", 295, and it's like maybe 295. It's like we'll see about that. But Matthew McCoy's got a little bit of size to him. He's also battling out for that left guard job, but they're not real big. I mean, he's 6'6", 295-ish. He's not a huge kid either. So how can you thrive up the middle? Can you beat them with size where they're small? Can you beat them with speed where they're big? It's a very unique matchup. And when this Miami team was good last year, their offensive line was beating you up front. When you could have some success against them, it's when you were making Cam Moore. Like it's one thing for Cam Moore to run around because he wants to buy time and make plays. It's another thing when he's scrambling around and because he has to. That's the difference. And you want to make him kind of run around because he has to. And if you can do that with Carson Beck, it's even more effective because he's not the athlete that he's not a stiff. It isn't like, you got like Dan McGuire back there. You're probably too young for that, but Mark McGuire's brother, Dan McGuire, was a quarterback at San Diego State back in the day. And he was a high draft pick, and he was like 6'8". He was completely immobile, which is why he couldn't play, couldn't make it in the NFL. But like, he's not that. But he's a pocket passer. And if you want to shut down the pass game, the absolute easiest way to do that is to make sure the quarterback doesn't have time to throw. That's the easiest way to shut down a pass game. Hey, look, Trev, you and I both play quarterback. I always found it really hard to complete passes when I was laying on the ground with the defender on top of me. I don't know if you found that easier than I did, but it was always a challenge for me to complete passes when I was laying on the ground. I call me crazy.
No, it made it a little bit harder. Yeah. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. I'm with you. But no, the
I
pass
was
game
money when
matchup
I could sit back there all day with nobody bothering me. But, that whole laying on the
man, you
ground
want
with
to talk
the defender on
about
top of me thing made it a little bit tough sometimes. Yeah.
you want to talk about money, dude. Catch me in a 7-on-7 session when there's no pressure, bro. Hey, man, I'll put in some work when there's no pass rush. But yeah, being on your back is a little bit tough to complete some passes. I agree with you. But right now, they are expecting Notre Dame to, I guess you'd say, outpass Miami. Well, I'm sorry, excuse me. FanDuel is expecting Miami to outpass Notre Dame in that aspect. Right now on FanDuel, the over-under for Carson Beck passing yards is 235.5.
And that's up.
Yep,
right?
It is. Yep, and the over-under for CJ Carr is down. The over-under for CJ Carr is now down to 186.5 on FanDuel. So I think that's also a really interesting facet to that game as well.
What's the Malachi Fields pass yards one, receiving yards one?
Right now, Malachi Fields over-under is still set at 39.5.
Did you take that action?
Of course I did. Look, man, Malachi Fields, he's played 24 games.
Low number, bro.
He has played 24 games in the last 2 seasons. He has gone under 40 receiving yards in 4 of those games. So in 20 of his 24 games, he's been over 40 receiving yards. Big fan of those numbers. Big fan. Well, Brian,
go ahead, Trev.
No, I was going to say, I was getting ready to switch over to run game, man.
Yeah.
And this is the side of the football where like I said, I would make the argument that this is the known commodity for Miami's offense coming back and somewhat of the unknown for Notre Dame's defense. There's signs pointing in the right direction. To your point, you alluded earlier, linebackers are a year older. You are physically, on paper, more stout against the run this year, but we got to see it. There were times last year where Notre Dame's rush defense was excellent, and there's times that either by choice and design or just by being outmanned up the middle, the rush defense took a pretty big hit. But for Miami, for all the moving pieces that they had on offense, got a lot of returners on the offensive line, and they returned 2 running backs, one in particular that could do some damage in this game. This is a big matchup to watch.
There's so many aspects of this game that are gonna be impactful. I would say this is the only one, I would argue, where it's good on not as good. Where Notre Dame offense, you have good run defense against good or good run offense against good run defense, bad pass offense against bad pass defense on paper. This matchup, it's a great pass game against a great pass defense. They're a much better rushing team than Notre Dame was a rushing defense. The yards per game don't tell you that. Miami was at 31st in the country in rushing yards per game. Notre Dame was at 49th. That's not a huge difference. The difference in yards per play is much more significant. Miami was at number 6 in the country, ahead of Notre Dame by like 0.0 something in yards per play. Mainly because Notre Dame was well ahead of them prior to having to play Indiana, Georgia, Penn State, and Ohio State. But still, that's very good. And 4th in the country last year in fewest tackles for loss allowed per game. Miami was 28th in the country in runs of 20 yards or more. Notre Dame was 71st in number of 20-yard runs allowed last season. And they ranked 37th in yards per rush allowed last season. They were 73rd in tackles for loss per game. That's the big thing is we can talk all day about, hey, Notre Dame needs to, Carson Beck's brand new and all the receivers are brand new. But if you can't stop them from running the football, it won't matter. If you're not better shutting down the run game, then it won't matter. If they're going to just run on you, they don't need to be great throwing the football because they're going to have time to throw. They're going to have guys open because you've got to overcommit resources. So this is the big part of the matchup that I think is going to be so key. And a big reason why Miami was so good on third down last year, their quarterback was clutch on third down. He could scramble and move the chains. But when you rank 6th in the country in rushing yards per game, that means you've got a lot of 2nd and 4s and 2nd and 3s and 2nd and 2s and then 3rd and 1s and 3rd and 2s and plays like that where you don't necessarily need to be like a super clutch team on third down because you're in an opportunity where, you it's a lot easier to handle. Miami last year was number 1 in the country in third down percentage, Trev. They were 102nd in the country in most third down snaps. I mean, you weren't even getting them to third down last year. Why? Because of that 5.7 yards per carry. And that's a very intriguing number to look at, Trev, is that number right there. 102nd, tied for 102nd in college football last year in fewest third down snaps. That's not a bad thing in every context. Sometimes it's you were low in third down because you were constantly 3 and out, and so you didn't have the ball a lot. Usually when a team, so that's true. Like one of the teams that they finished tied for 120th with or 102nd with is Florida State. That was true for Florida State. That's not true for Miami or Colorado, who ranked 105th last year in fewest third down opportunities. And Indiana last year ranked 132nd in fewest third down opportunities. Why? Because they weren't getting to third down. That's why. And that's where Miami is. They weren't getting to a lot of third downs because they were getting into, as I mentioned, a lot of 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4s, where you were just moving the chains. And I think that's something that makes this football team, very, very, what made them very dangerous last year. Whereas you look at Notre Dame last year, they ranked 28th in most third down snaps. Part of that, again, is they played 4 postseason games, but that's still a lot of snaps. So I think this is going to be a huge factor in this game, Trev, is looking at that run game, especially, I think they're going to lean on it even more this year. They do have a lot of size up front. You do have Francis Mauigoa coming back. And as Cooper's a huge kid. Markel Bell's massive. James Brockermeyer's a veteran. Mark Fletcher's a 6'2", 215+ pound back, hammer back. You've got Jordan Lyles, a slasher. Chamar Brown was a 1,000-yard rusher at North Dakota State last year. Like, you've got talent there. You want to take pressure off your brand new quarterback and your brand new receiving core, you come out and run the football in Notre Dame. And if you're Shannon Dawson, you're looking at film last year saying, do I want to try to, slam my head into a brick wall by trying to throw the ball all day on Notre Dame? Or do I want to maybe try to come and run at them, which is an area where they were a little bit vulnerable last year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's some real world application of what you're talking about in terms of, brand new quarterback, bunch of different receivers, don't know how that's going to go. The Notre Dame USC game last year is a prime example of what you're talking about. Why was that game so close? And a lot of people to the naked eye are just going to say, oh, it's because Christian Gray sucked that day. It's like, no, he had a bad game, but that's not the only reason why. Notre Dame gave up 197 rushing yards, along with 368 passing yards. But USC was able to do that without Woody Marks. Woody Marks didn't have a single carry in that game. Quentin Joyner averaged 8.3 yards per carry. Brian Jackson, their backup, averaged 11.8 yards per carry.
Yeah. Now, his big run did come after after Christian's pick. But still, they were letting Jaden Maeva scramble and run on them as well in that game. Yeah.
And so it's just all that domino effect. Notre Dame wasn't able to be as aggressive because they weren't able to stop the run. That's why they weren't able to generate a pass rush as much, because they were getting gashed in the run game. That is a fear that I have going into this game because some of the ingredients are similar. Jaden Maeva was taking over for USC, didn't have a whole lot of starts under his belt with USC. Wasn't that great at his previous stop. USC had a bunch of different mouths to feed at the receiving core. Pass protection was a question mark on the offensive line. So I see some similarities with this Miami offense. And so, yeah, this is going to be an absolutely huge facet of Notre Dame's defense on Sunday is, will they be able to make Miami one-dimensional? I don't think there's a whole lot of question marks around, is Notre Dame able to put a lid on any team's passing ability short of, when they get to the Ohio States of the world and have to guard a Jeremiah Smith. Hate to break it to you, Miami. You have talented players. There's no Jeremiah Smith on your roster. That's not a knock on you guys, because I don't know if there's a Jeremiah Smith on Notre Dame's roster either. He's the best receiver in college football. But point being, Notre Dame's secondary success is not just indicative of Miami's talent at the receiver position. You have to find a way to make them one-dimensional, and they can't be able to run the football, especially if the elements are at play here. This is an absolutely huge matchup, Brian. So let's talk about the matchups that will impact this run game, the individual matchups. And I think where you have to start, you said it perfectly to me before the show started, and it's not rocket science here. It's Miami's interior offensive line versus the interior defensive line for Notre Dame. And I think that's where you have to start with this conversation.
The middle of the line is going to be so important on both sides of the ball, Trev. So important. You want to shut a team down from running the football. Everything we just said about how important it was for Notre Dame's offensive line to establish the dominance there is exactly true why the Notre Dame defense can't allow Miami to do that. You want to slow down the run game, beat it up the middle. It's hard to do, but it's not hard to know how important it is. You want to stop a team from running the football, don't let them run up the middle. Because here's the truth about this. You're not going to outrun this Notre Dame defense to the perimeter. Just not going to happen unless they are assignment incorrect. But it just comes down to they're spilling everything outside. Drake Bowen's crashing and forcing bounces. You know, they're setting the edge and they're trying to spill everything outside. Or you're getting beat up the middle and you've got to make an early cut and bounce it back and try to bounce it outside. You're not going very far. This is a really fast Notre Dame defense. Really fast Notre Dame defense. And if you're playing east-west because you're getting beat up the middle, you're done. If you're Notre Dame and you force them to run east-west because you're beating them up the middle, it's great for you. At the same time, the exact opposite is true. If they're able to just slash and hammer you up the middle and neutralize your speed, now they've got the advantage. And that's what Miami's going to try to do with their run game. They're going to try to hammer Notre Dame with Mark Fletcher. And then, get Notre Dame to collapse and then get the ball outside with their screen game, their quick game, and some of their stuff with Jordan Lyle. And you can't allow them to do that. That's going to be such an important part of this game for Notre Dame is beat them up the middle, because if you can't run up the middle, you're not going to beat Notre Dame if you're in the run game. You're just not. That's Jason Onye's got to have a big game. He's got to live up to the hype of what we've heard about him. Gabriel Rubio needs to be a more consistent version of who he was last year in the playoffs. When he was on his game, he would shut you down. And when he wasn't, you struggled. He'd struggle. You need Jared Dawson to be what we've heard he's going to be. And if they can do that, then I think this team will be okay. And now the other thing, too, is there's a couple edge players that have been really good pass rushers for Notre Dame that haven't been great run defenders. Bubakar Traore's an example of that. You've got to be a better all-around player, too. But it really starts up. And the tackles, the linebackers have to tackle well. The safeties have to fit well and tackle well. All those things are important. But at the end of the day, if you whoop them up the middle, it's going to be hard for them. So when I'm watching this game, when it first starts, here's what I'm going to be looking at on the TV. What's 47, 41, 97, 93, 56? What are they doing? Like, how are they performing? And if I'm looking at that saying, okay, yeah, they're winning that battle, then I'm going to feel a lot better about Notre Dame's chances of slowing down the Miami offense. That's the most important matchup in this game, in my opinion, for the Notre Dame defense.
Couldn't agree more. I echo all the same things that you did about the interior of the defensive line. Only thing that I have to add is the linebackers have to win at the point of attack. Mark Fletcher's a big back, man. I mean, it's weird. Miami's roster has everybody's heights, but they don't have anybody's weights listed, it is what it is. But I know that he's a big running back. They don't even have Mohamed Toure transferred in, and they still haven't even listed his number on their official roster. And so I have an article coming out later today, and it's supposed to have some people's players' number and position, and I don't have one in there for Mohamed Toure because Miami just doesn't have it listed on their roster. It's just blank. But venting session aside, Notre Dame's linebackers have to win at the point of attack. There have been signs of, Jalen Sneed put on weight this offseason. Jay Nosberry wanted to put on weight this offseason. Kingston Viliama dropped a little bit of weight so he could get to the point of attack a little bit quicker. And they're all a year more experienced. You have a running back in Mark Fletcher who will fall forward. He will fall forward for the extra yard. And to your point about Miami's yards per carry being at 5.7 last year, and them getting into very few third down situations, him falling forward for an additional 2 yards or getting pushed back for a -1 could be the difference between putting them into more third down situations to let your edge rushers go eat. So linebackers are going to have to win at point of attack as well, but could not agree more. That interior, that defensive line is going to have to be stout. Similar to what we did on the offensive side, Brian, let's take a step back. What do you need to see from Notre Dame's defense as a whole on Sunday when they take on Miami?
I'll go twofold. And the first part is very quickly, it's a repeat of what we said on the offense. It's impose your will. But like I'll explain it why it's important, but I'm not going to only stick with that because then that's lazy. You said not lazy, but it's I want to give a little something different. But like you need to impose your will. Win in the trenches, fly to the ball, be physical. When you get to the quarterback, drill them legally, drill them. When the receivers catch the ball, make them pay for it. Like take the fight to Miami. Don't sit back and what are they going to do? Take the fight to them. But but also the other part of that is within that discipline is going to be so important in this game defensively. And one of the concerns that I have is that you can shut Miami down, shut them down, blown coverage, 50-yard gain, 50-yard touchdown. Shut the run game down, linebacker misfits backside, they cut back, bam, 50-yard touchdown. Like discipline in this game is going to be so important for Notre Dame. Yes, be aggressive, take the fight to them, but if that's causing you to then have bad run fits or missed tackles in space, that's a problem. And when I talk about aggressive, I'm not talking about blitzing 7 guys. It's just about being physical, taking if you're bringing 4 at the snap of the ball, I want to see those Notre Dame linemen come off the ball and just punch people right in the mouth. That's kind of my thing. So I absolutely think that that's important, but you have to do it within a disciplined structure because Miami has the kind of athletes at receiver. Like you can talk about their lack of experience, but JoJo Trader doesn't have experience. I know what kind of athlete he is, though. CJ Daniels only had 40-some catches at LSU last year, but I know what kind of athlete he is. I know what kind of athlete Ray. Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a complete rank on Ray's last name for Miami, the wide receiver for Miami. I can't believe I'm
is it Joseph?
Yes, Ray Joseph. He hasn't caught a lot of balls in college, but I know what kind of athlete he is. If you're making mistakes against those kind of athletes, if you make a mistake against Jordan Lyles, if you make a mistake against when Mark Fletcher's got the football and you run fit wrong or you take a bad angle to a receiver or running back, they can make you pay. So being disciplined is important. When this Notre Dame defense is disciplined and shutting down the big plays, they're very hard to move the ball on. Very hard. What did USC beat Notre Dame with? They weren't methodically moving the ball down the field. It was big plays. What did Ohio State beat Notre Dame with? Gash plays, big plays. You can't allow that to happen against Miami. You've got to play disciplined football. That's the biggest thing for me. Play smart, disciplined football. Let your talent rule the day. And if it's about that, who's the most talented team? If it comes down to this, Trev, who's the most talented team? Then Notre Dame's going to win. Agreed. They're more talented than Miami. But when your talent is close, and it is close, but the team with more talent is the team that plays with less discipline and makes more mistakes, now that talent has been neutralized, and that other team is going to take advantage because they're talented enough to make you pay for your mistakes where they didn't give you those same opportunities. Yeah. And so that's why I say for this Notre Dame defense is be disciplined. If they're disciplined, as long as their D-line plays well, they will slow Miami down, if not shut Miami down. But that's going to be a big key. And we'll dive into this more tomorrow because limiting big plays is going to be one of my keys to victory. But it really comes down to discipline. That's what I want to see. And sometimes that can be difficult in an opener. But they were great at that against A&M last year.
Yeah.
I mean, they just didn't give A&M anything. They made A&M methodically move the ball down the field. At the end of the day, you just couldn't do that because eventually you're going to make a mistake. And that's what they need to do in this game as well.
Couldn't agree more. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We are going to wrap up with a mailbag. But in the meantime, be sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Vince and I will be back again live tomorrow night for the spread option at 8 p.m. We're going to be going over the different locks and various spreads of week 1 of college football. Awesome slate coming up. You want to make sure you tune in for that. Make sure you are subscribed to both channels. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here, subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to take us home today, the final part of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. We are having a mailbag. Now, if this does happen to be your first one, be sure to put in a little MB or a mailbox emoji that lets us know to set your question or comment aside. And if you want yours pushed and bumped up to the top, because as much as we would love to, Brian and I can't go forever. So if you want to make sure that your question does get answered, we do greatly appreciate a super chat. And those will get bumped to the top. But Brian, I'm ready to get this thing started, man.
We have a super chat from Luke Yeater. Thank you very much, Luke. Says from Sarasota, love the show. Go Irish, Luke. Thank you very, very, very much from that. So I appreciate that very much. Let's get to the top here with Kevin Bavis.
I'm an old timer, but who do you think was a better head coach?
I'm thinking that maybe there was a second part to this question that we didn't star, but I'm gonna go up and saying this. But who do you think was a better head coach? Let's see if Kevin has a follow-up part to that. Between who? I don't know the answer to that. So, here we go. Who's a better head coach, Era or Lou? That's okay. Here's where I'm at, Kevin. Let me just pull up their records and I'll make some points. So obviously, advantage Era Parseghian in that he won two championships. Lou Holtz only won one. Okay, I'll give him that. That's a big part of it, and that's why I understand why a lot of people would want to give Era the advantage. Now, keep in mind they're both legends. They're both Hall of Famers in my book. They both did a tremendous job at Notre Dame. But let me make a quick case for Lou Holtz in this one. Era was tremendous, and they both took over Notre Dame when they were struggling. Like they both inherited coaches who had done not a very good job. And Era came in, did a great job, led Notre Dame to 9-1, number 3 record in year 1, 7-2-1 in year 2. And so obviously his start was better than Lou's. Lou went 5-6 in year 1, 8-4 in year 2. They did start off 8-1, but lost their last 3 games. Both won a title in year 3. Over the next 5 years, Notre Dame under Lou Holtz finished in the top 10 5 times. Over the next 5 years after Notre Dame's title in 1966 under Era, they finished in the top 10 4 times. And then obviously Era won a title in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in his 10th year. And Lou Holtz in his 10th year went 9-3. So Era had more sustained success than Lou did because he obviously won a title later in his career. So in those regards, I understand if somebody wants to give Era a pass, but I got a couple counter arguments to make on this one. Number one is I think Lou played against far more difficult schedules. There were years where Era would play against Purdue, who was good, and then USC, who was good, and that was it. And I don't think it was intentional. Just that was kind of where they were. Michigan wasn't playing Notre Dame. They wouldn't play Notre Dame at the time. It just kind of shook out that way. There was periods during, Era's tenure where Michigan State was really good, like early in his career, but they weren't good. Like later in his career, like there were some tenures there. So like in 1966, Michigan State was number 2 team in the country. They were really good. They tied Notre Dame that year, finished number 2 in the country. They were the number 1 team in the coaches poll the year before under Duffy Daugherty's, right? So like, oh man, they played Michigan. The next 6 years of Duffy Daugherty's time, they went 3-7, 5-5, 4-6, 4-6, 6-5, 5-5-1. So they weren't getting that same test from Era after that. And so I think that's key. Whereas I mentioned this in the show with Chris Zorich. In his 3 years at Notre Dame, what was it, Trev? It was like they beat 15 top 20 teams in 3 years during his tenure from 88 to 90. That's insane. And they beat, it was something like 8 or 9, maybe 10 top 10 teams during his tenure. They had 2 wins over a team ranked number 1. So I think that's advantage Lou. He was successful against I think a tougher slate. I think Lou had a little less. This is what I've been told by others. I don't know this for a fact. This is what I've been told by others. I've had a lot of people tell me that Era didn't get. He wasn't like football was king at Notre Dame, but Era got more support from the school. Recruiting was different back then in the 60s and 70s. Makeups of teams were different back in the 60s and 70s. Whereas Lou played in an era where, if we're being honest, the school did not support him nearly as much. So I think that gives Lou a little bit of an edge, in my opinion, in that regard. And here's the final piece. Lou was way better against USC than Era was. Now, Era played against a much better version of USC. He played against the John McKay version of USC. But the fact is they had some rough moments against USC. Some really rough moments. So if you go and look at Era's tenure at Notre Dame, and he was there from 64 to 74. Let me pull this up. Let's go year by year. So 64 to 74 under Coach Parsegian. They lost his first game, won the next two, lost, tied the next two. USC won the next three. Notre Dame won in 73. USC won the next three. Notre Dame won in 77. Actually, so Era was gone in 74. So let's see. Let's go back. 64, USC, Notre Dame won 2, USC won 1, tied 2. And then 3 of the next 4 years, they won. Notre Dame won that, and then they beat him his last year. So Era went 3 and see, did they not play 1 year? No, he went 3 and was he at Notre Dame 11 years, right? So 64, they won in 65, 66, 67, 73. So they went 3, 6, and 2 in 9 years against USC. I think Lou only lost to USC once. Beat him in 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, tied in 94, beat him in 95, and then they beat Notre Dame in 96 and lose last year. So that matters a little bit to me, that, you were more dominant. And it wasn't like USC was never good. I mean, when Notre Dame beat USC in 1988 at USC, they were ranked number 2 in the country that year. The next year they were ranked in the top 10. So they still played some pretty good teams, but they didn't play those John McKay teams were a lot different. So that's kind of where it comes down to. Maybe that's a little bit of also, I lived in the Lou era. I didn't live in the era of Eric Parsegian, but there's no wrong answer. I personally lean towards Lou just for all the reasons I mentioned, but Era won 2 titles and Lou only won 1. But I still contend that Lou got screwed out of a second title. And Notre Dame should have been the national champions in 1993. I don't care what anybody says. They got screwed out of that. The number 1 and 2 team at the end of that year played each other, and Notre Dame beat them convincingly. So I'm still bitter about that one. Sorry, just am. But that's my answer.
Understandable.
That's my answer.
Super chat from Christopher Hardy. Appreciate the super chat, Christopher. Thank you very much. It's game week, but a cool piece of history. Buy, sell, hold, swapping Miami in 2028 and Wake Forest in 2029 and play a 50th anniversary game in Tokyo on Sunday, November 25th, 2029 of the 1979 Miami game that was played there.
Trev, I think it'd be cool to go to Tokyo. I've thought about, maybe someday doing that, but I have no interest in playing a football game in Tokyo. I mean, Notre Dame won that game 40-15. I'm not a big fan of playing games out of the country. I understand doing it occasionally. The Ireland thing makes sense for Notre Dame. I'm not someone who cares about them playing a game in Rome. I don't even love the idea of playing neutral site games. I live with it because I get why Notre Dame does it. I don't love it. I'd rather games be played in your home stadiums, especially on campus if you have campus stadiums. That's why I don't love playing at Pitt, because it's off campus. It's the Steelers stadium. It's not even Pitt Stadium. You walk in there, it's black and yellow everywhere. It's like it's not even their stadium. Miami doesn't have their own stadium. It's like there's no Miami Hurricanes feel inside that stadium. It's all Dolphins. It's all Dolphins colors. Like it doesn't even feel like, it's not like when you went to the Orange Bowl and it was like freaking orange. There's a lot of orange everywhere, which is Miami's colors. There's no home feel to that. I don't like it. So I have no interest in doing that. I'm sure some people think that'd be cool. I just don't care to repeat that game. It doesn't mean a whole lot to me. It's the Mirage Bowl in Tokyo, Japan.
Yeah, I'm selling it as well. Look, it's already hard enough for Notre Dame fans to get even up to South Bend to see some games. It's hard for Notre Dame fans to go see games away. I mean, you add either having a passport, renewing a passport, or getting a passport into that equation. I'm good off that. It's a sell for me. Cool thought. I get where it's coming from, but
I do, and I think it's well thought out and cool. It's just not something that I'm overly interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't do it for me. Trev, doesn't do it for me.
I'm with you.
Trevor Rocket, my guy, have not seen you in a while. Hope you're doing well, buddy.
My guy Trevor Rocket with the super chat, the man with the awesome first name. Greetings from Drayton, Ontario, Canada. Trevor and Brian, how do you think the offensive line will play Sunday night on the road against Miami's front seven?
That's the $1 million question, Trevor. I mean, it really is. I don't know how they're going to play against Miami's front. I think they're capable of performing. Miami's front reminds me a lot of the Texas A&M front from last year. Yeah. Big power ends, good athletic tackles, not massive, but, guys can penetrate. It reminded me a lot of A&M last year. And Notre Dame, I thought, handled that group pretty well. Had some pressures at moments. Riley was able to get him out of some trouble. It was their field goal drive. Riley steps up into the pocket after Anthony Knapp got beat outside. Riley takes off running, scrambles for a bunch of yards, then gets hit, targeted 15 more yards. It helps set up the field goal. CJ Carr can do that. I mean, he can step up and scramble. But Anthony did a nice job of keeping a body on the guy and all that. But they ran the ball well on Texas A&M in that game last year. I mean, just from the beginning. And if you remember, they had a couple big runs brought back, couple good runs brought back because of penalties in that game. Yeah. So they ran on them pretty well, handled them pretty well. This is a similar unit that plays the game in similar fashion, but there's also units that were like A&M last year that Notre Dame didn't play very well against. So it's what version of the line are we going to get? And I think that's the biggest question for Joe Rudolph's unit this year is, will they be more consistent? Like that's kind of the concern. And so we'll see how that goes, but I think they're capable of winning this matchup, dominating this match. If Notre Dame dominates this matchup, then we should be sitting here really excited about this offensive line in the postgame show. I don't need him to do that because I know how good Miami's D line is. I just need him to win the matchup. Do that, and Jeremiah Love and Jordarian Price are going to get theirs. So will CJ Carr. It's just you've got to win that matchup. I think they're capable of it. If I had to predict now, I'd say that they will, but it's going to be a battle. This is a good D line from Miami, very good D line. And I mean, to a degree, it's like, what version of Ruben Bain are we getting? Like, there's an assumption that he's healthy now. He's going to okay. I get that, but still need to see it. Just like there's assumption, well, I think Anthony Knapp's going to be better. Well, yeah, I think so, but I need to see it. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. That's what makes talking about openers so difficult. I mean, we're sitting there comparing stats from 2024. It's all we got. It's what we saw last year. It gives us at least a baseline, but things can change, obviously.
Super chat from Michael S. Thank you, Michael. Are you surprised by the indecision at right guard? What does this imply for line coordination?
Well, I think that sometimes we assume because the coaches don't tell us things that there's not decisions. And I know what Marcus Freeman said. I also know kind of what we've heard about what's going on there. We'll see. I haven't talked about it as much because of obviously we've heard other guys are going to start from good sources, and it turns out to be a little bit different. Sometimes things change. But I think what it says is that Notre Dame has two really talented players that are both showing that they're capable of starting. That's ultimately what I think it comes down to. Sometimes a late decided battles because nobody's won it. Sometimes a late decided battles because two guys are playing their butts off and you're having a tough time of, do you want to go with the more talented player, the bigger, stronger player in Gerby Lambert, or the more experienced guy in Sullivan Absher? That's who's also talented in his own right. That's not an easy decision. And sometimes the answer can be at guard, well, let's do both. But if you're going to do that, you better have a plan for that. But I don't think there's indecision there. I just think they haven't told us what their plan is yet.
This is one of those position battles that, look, man, Notre Dame starting right guard on Sunday night is either going to be 6'7", 335 or 6'8", 327. I'm okay. I'm okay with whatever direction that goes in. But I'm with you. I'm with you completely.
With anything, as long as the decision is made for the right reasons, I'm good.
Tristan Schaub, hypothetically speaking, if every ACC team would have won, yes, including Stanford, would that have changed the perception of that conference? And if so, how much?
If every ACC team would have won, won what? What am I missing? Like they're out of conference. Stanford's the only ACC team that won the opener. I guess,
sure.
Tristan, I need a little bit more context to what do you mean as far as won what? Against Notre Dame? If you could do me a favor, Tristan, I would love just a little bit of follow-up. We're not sharp enough apparently to get this, so I apologize. You can just follow up and just let me know what you mean by won what, just maybe a little clarification, then we'll try to answer it.
Super chat from ND Milton fan. Appreciate the super chat. Am I nuts or is Miami overrated? I mean, they didn't beat one team last year that ended the regular season in the rankings.
Okay. So no, I don't think you're nuts. I think we both don't have Miami as high as 10. I think they're a little overrated, but I don't think they're overrated in that they should be ranked 35th and they're 10th. I don't even think them being overranked is as egregious as how high LSU is ranked compared to Miami was a better team than LSU was last year, and they're ranked lower than LSU in the rankings. And they were 10-2 in the regular season. LSU was 8-4 in the regular season. And, you can't say, well, yeah, but Miami did this, this, and this. Well, I'm like, well, okay, well, Florida played LSU last year and beat them by 11. Beat LSU by 11. Miami played Florida last year, blew them out in Florida. Why is LSU ranked higher? So I think they're more overrated than what Miami is. But in technically speaking, Miami's overrated. I think they're a top 25 team. I think they've earned a top 20 team. Again, they were a 10-3 top 15 team last year. I think they had an argument to be a playoff team. I get why they weren't, but I think they had a better argument than Alabama did. I think they had a better argument than Ole Miss did, especially since Miami blew out a team that beat Ole Miss. So, at Ole Miss. So, I think that they deserve to be in the top 20. Oh, they got a new quarterback. Yeah, I know, but he's a quarterback that has led his team to the SEC title game each of the last 2 years. So it's not like they're replacing him with some kid from, Mercer and hoping that he can make the jump from Incarnate Word or Mercer to Miami. They got a kid from the SEC who's put up a ton of numbers in the SEC. They're getting guys that are from mostly not all, like the Poyser kid at safety is not a P5 kid, but they're not out here getting guys that were that were at a D2 school last year and hoping that they can make the jump. They brought in good football players. And there's a lot of other teams that brought in good football players through the portal that are having to build through the portal. It's the new reality. So, and technically, are they overrated? Yeah, because I wouldn't have them 10th. If I think they should be 13th, and then technically they're overrated at 10. I don't think it's an overrated that makes me say, huh? What? Why? I get why Miami's ranked in the top 10. I don't agree with it, but I get it. So, yeah. I get where you're coming from, but
depends on how you classify overrated, to your point. There's a train of thought that says overrated means that people think you're good when actually you suck. I don't think that's the case for Miami, but I do think that they are overrated in the fact that people are slotting them in as playoff teams and that they should be a top 10 team this year. In that sense, yeah, they are overrated, but they're a talented team. There's a reason why that this is a top 10 matchup on Sunday. There's a reason why this is a huge matchup for Notre Dame and for Miami. So depends on your lens of overrated.
Yeah.
From Brian Sullivan, what happened to Jabron Payne? Not even on the depth chart after working his tail off to be back.
Well, it's awesome that he worked his tail off to be back, but at the end of the day, you're still going to put the best players out there. And unfortunately for Jabron, first of all, I wouldn't read too much into a depth chart. We've seen plenty last year, Trev, where a depth chart would say one thing, and then what we saw on Saturday said something different. Yep. But if this depth chart is accurate, wouldn't surprise me if it is, because Nolan James had a great fall camp. It's awesome that he's worked so hard to get back, and I love the kid for that, but doesn't mean he's still one of their best 4 running backs. And Chance Tucker worked his butt off to get back at corner. He had a very devastating knee injury last year. I love that. I love that kid, but he's still not better than the 2 freshmen at corner. So I love the story, but I just don't think he's as good as the guys ahead of him, unfortunately. But I would love for him to get a chance this year to do something because he's a great kid, great family, works, and he's a talent. Trevor, I said this before. He could transfer to half the teams in the Big Ten and rush for 1,000 yards next year.
Easily.
Like, nope. I'm like, dude, go to Iowa. Please go to Iowa. Would love it if you went to Iowa or go to Illinois, something like that, where like you can go and run the ball. Go to Indiana, where he was originally committed to play for Dylan McCullough, and go and be starter. He'd do very well there. But I think that Jabron had some unfinished business, wanted to get that degree. But, he's a good football player. But, who else could do what I just said? Every other running back on the depth chart. So it's an unfortunate situation. There's years in the past where Jabron Payne is no doubt about it, the number 2 or 3 running back. This version of Jabron, number 2, maybe even starter. It's just this team is so loaded. It's an unfortunate situation. But kudos to him because he did put in the work to get back. Like worked his tail off to get back.
From Joseph Barrett, Brian, how good was the U's 2001 team? A lot of Miami fans claim that was college football's best team ever. I'm not sure that team was better than Miami's 1986 team.
Well, Miami's 1986 team didn't even win a championship. I mean, they got beat by Penn State in the I think it was the Orange Bowl. Like on their number 2 Penn State beat them 14-10. That 1986 Miami team was pretty good. That's the team that beat number 1 Oklahoma that year. I'd say there's Miami teams that you could argue are maybe better than that 01 team. I don't know that team I would say is 87 Miami beat number 20 Florida 31-4. I would love to watch that game. You got 2 safeties in that game. Beat number 10 Arkansas 51-7 on the road. Beat number 4 Florida State on the road 26-25. Beat number 10 Notre Dame 24-0. Beat number 8 South Carolina 20-16, and then beat number 1 Oklahoma 20-14. I think that team you could argue was better than the 1987 team. You could even argue that the 1988 team was better than the 1986 team. They beat number 1 Florida State 31-0. Beat number 15 Michigan, who, by the way, finished that year ranked 4th. Their only losses being to number 1 Michigan that year lost to number 1 Notre Dame by 2 and number 2 Miami by 1 that year. Lost to the eventual Notre Dame team, the eventual national champions, by a point at Notre Dame. Beat number 11 LSU in November on the road 44-3, and then beat number 8 Arkansas 18-16, then beat number 6 Nebraska 23-3. So Miami had some great teams back then. But I think why the Miami team of 2001 is considered so dominant is the best ever is because there's 2 aspects to it. Number 1 is they were incredibly dominant. Beat number 13 Florida State on the road 49-27. Beat number 15 Syracuse 59-0. This is in November, so this isn't like 15th at the beginning of the year and then finish the year really bad. This is ranked very high. The next week, they played number 11 Washington and beat them 65-7. Like that's a really impressive performance. Then the next week beat Virginia Tech, number 14 Virginia Tech on the road. It was originally slated for the weekend after September 11th. Is when that game was supposed to be played. It got moved back to December 1st because obviously all football. Well, actually, we had to play that weekend when I was at Wittenberg. They made us play. We had to travel up to Alma, Michigan to play a game that weekend. They didn't cancel our game. But just about everybody else canceled their games and should have. So they moved that game back to December 1st, and they beat that really good Virginia Tech team 26-24. And then they beat number 4 Nebraska with Eric Crouch, the Heisman Trophy winner, 36-14 in the postseason. So that was a pretty special team, a very special team. So and you just look at like something that was like 15 first-round draft picks on that team. It was an insanely talented team. So I think that's why they get the nod. I mean, the game against Virginia Tech was close, Trev. They won that game by 2 on the road, but the rest of their games were 20 at Penn State, 33-7. Beat Rutgers by 61, beat Pitt on the road by 22, beat Troy State by 31, beat a ranked Florida State team on the road by 22. beat West Virginia by 42, beat Temple by 38, beat BC by 11, beat Syracuse by 59, beat Washington by 58, and then beat Nebraska by 23. They had one game all year that was decided by single digits. That's pretty good. That's pretty dominant. That's a pretty dominant football team.
Fun fact for you, if that 2001 Miami team never scored an offensive touchdown over the course of their season, they would have went 8-5.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You don't score a single offensive point in 13 games and you still get 8 wins.
Because defensive touchdowns, safe, field goal. Would they count field goals? You kick field goals and defensive touchdowns, or
no offensive touchdowns.
Yeah,
be 8-5.
That's almost as crazy as your Purdue stat from last year, where if they spotted teams
34 points.
They'd still be what was the record?
6-6.
That's so crazy. That's still so nuts. Mm-hmm. I still can't.
And they would have lost 4 of those games still by double digits by spotting the other team 34.
So that's awesome. I just think that's just dominance. Do I think that they're the greatest team of all time? That's debatable. I still contend that the 96 Nebraska team is the most dominant, because to me, the best team ever isn't, well, if you play this team and that team has to play that team from a different era. We've talked about that. And my whole point is, well, you that's unfair, because then there's a lot of teams that are just okay now that could beat a bunch of teams from the 60s. Does that mean that these teams are better? Well, could you take, for example, Boston College from this year's Notre Dame schedule and play against the Notre Dame 1966 team? Would they win? Well, if you take the same athletes and the same nutrition programs and you import them into today and play by today's rules with today's training, they're probably going to whoop that Notre Dame team. But that's silly. It's about looking at dominance of your era. That's what I look at. And as good as Miami was, I've said this, Trevor, that it was the 95 Nebraska team. They played Florida. But this is what they did that year. They beat Oklahoma State 64-21, went on the road and beat Michigan State 50-10. They beat Arizona State 77-28. They beat Pacific 49-7. They beat a Washington State team that finished that was just not good that year, 35-21. So worst game of the year was against a 3-8 Washington State team. Beat Missouri 57-0. Now they get into the tough part of their schedule. Play number 8 Kansas State, beat them 49-25. Played number 7 Colorado on the road, beat them 44-21. Beat Iowa State 73-14. Went on the road, beat number 10 Kansas 41-3. Played Oklahoma at home, beat them 37-0, and then played number 2 Florida, a game I made you watch recently, Trev. Number 2 Florida in the Fiesta Bowl and beat them 62-24. Like, that was an incredibly dominant football team in a power conference. So I think there's other teams that are in the conversation with that 0-1 team, including 19 LSU is in that conversation. But that Miami team is one of the most dominant it's the most talented I've ever seen. There's no question it's the most talented team I've ever seen. And I don't think that's debatable. That doesn't mean it was the best team I've ever seen. And that's where my debate is. But they're in the conversation. That Miami team in 0-1 was an unbelievably good football team. Unbelievably good football team.
Agreed.
It's like, I made you watch that 95 Nebraska team, and it's like Lawrence Phillips comes off the bench, and who they put in comes off the field. Who they put in? Amon Green.
Yeah.
Stupid. It's just ridiculous, man. It was crazy. So anyway, great question. I love those, Joseph. Yep. I love those.
Tristan Schaub had a follow-up in the chat from his question.
Yep. So he said, I just caught up. I mistyped. If those ACC teams won their respective week 1 games, does it change perception? So let's just go through the week 1 slate. Obviously, you have Florida State plays Alabama. Clemson plays LSU. Those are obviously 2 big ones.
Miami plays Notre Dame.
Miami plays Notre Dame. That's a big one. You've got NC State beats East Carolina. It doesn't matter. Georgia Tech goes on the road and beats Colorado. Syracuse beats Tennessee. Yeah. I mean, Trev, we're talking absolutely. Virginia Tech beats South Carolina and then North Carolina beats TCU. If they just only lose 2 of those games, let's just say that Miami and Florida State lose, or Florida State and Virginia Tech lose. So like some combination of just 2 games. I think that's a big statement for the ACC. Because let's just say hypothetically that Miami and Florida State lose. You still would have a Georgia Tech win at Colorado and a North Carolina win over TCU. So you just went 2-0 against the Big 12. So that's huge to kind of maybe say you're boosted ahead of the Big 12. Clemson beats LSU. So top 10 versus top 10. Virginia Tech goes on the road and beats a top 15 South Carolina. Like that alone, Trevor, in my opinion. Oh, and then Syracuse beats Tennessee in Atlanta. That alone, even with 2 losses by Miami and Florida State, is a giant statement for the ACC.
Oh, yeah.
Giant statement. I even think going 500 is a good day. Like, pretty good day. I mean, 500 in the games of Power 4 teams, not 500 overall, because you go 500 overall, I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, NC State beat East Carolina, Duke beat Elon, Wake beat Kennesaw State, Pitt beat Duquesne, Boston College beat Fordham, Louisville beat Eastern Kentucky, but you lost every other game against Power. That's not a state. I mean, in the big games, if you go 500, that's okay. You're going to have a couple good wins in there to go 500 in those games. So I think that could be a good statement for the ACC. But to Tristan's point, if they win out, that would be one of the biggest, like seismic weekends in college football recent memory. Just the number of like that changes the landscape like that.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I love Tristan's like self-deprecating. He goes, Trev read it out loud and I was confused. It was his question. So thank you for being understanding up for us, Tristan. We were trying to read between the lines, but I think that's a really good question. Trev, I just think if they go 5-2 or 6-2 or whatever it is in those games, that's a pretty big statement. It's a pretty big statement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, even if they go, to your point, even if they go 500, depending on what games they win and what games they lose, that's also still a really big statement.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
From Vanilla Chill, seems like rain is pretty much guaranteed on Sunday. How do coaches prepare for that? Do they wet the field they practice on, play with wet footballs? How would you as a coach prepare for it?
You have to have some wet football drills. First of all, I mean, it hasn't really rained the last couple of days at Notre Dame and here in South Bend. So it rained, was it yesterday or the day before? But it's not raining today. So if it's raining, the problem is like it rained actually not this night, but the night before, but it rained overnight. And during the day it was sunny. And like by the time you get out to football practice, it's going to be dried up. But you may wet the field. I don't know how much Notre Dame would want to do that, especially the grass field. And I don't know that wetting the turf field does a whole lot because a wet turf field is a very different field than a wet grass field. And I believe Miami Gardens, I think Hard Rock is grass, not turf, correct?
Correct.
I don't know that Notre Dame would want to tear up their practice field that's, back there. Maybe they do that, but it's more so about the wet balls. I think that's the thing you've got to practice with. I remember, I don't know, every team does it differently, but I remember John Elway would talk about how, they would do wet ball drills. They would just dunk that thing in a bucket of water and then spot it. Other teams would have you have a trainer kind of spray the balls and stuff like that. But that's a big part of it too. One of the underrated aspects of preparing for a game like this is people are going to laugh about this. It is imperative that your operations team spend legitimate time during the week of practice with your ball boys.
Yep.
To get them to be really focusing on get the ball into the official, be assertive with it, get dry balls in, make sure that you're getting those things dried off. That's an important part of it too. But you've got to give your quarterback some experience throwing a wet football. At the end of the day, though, your hands are what they are. Yeah. Your hand size is what it is. Your ability to grip a wet football is what it is. But a coach has got to know what that is and then be able to kind of make some changes, and figure it out. But it's just practicing it. There's other things too. So like we played a game, 2002 when I was at Muhlenberg. We played our arch rival Moravian in the last game of the year, Trev, and it was like it was literally like a 1980s movie of football. You know, like every 1980s movie, they have that one game where it's like just a brown field and everybody's, uniforms are covered in just brown. That was that game. Like our running back, Matt Bernardo, had like 30, 40 carries for like 100 and something yards. I mean, we were just running into this. We won 8-0. I mean, we threw one ball. I think I can remember we had a post wide open where Cody Shea had to like wait on it. I mean, it was an ugly day. My players picked me up and dropped me in the mud after the game, which was kind of funny. But like during pregame, our whole pregame with me and the running backs was working on how to properly cut in the mud and on a wet field, because you can't make sudden cuts. It had to be choppier with a wider base. So run, and then boom, 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 chop, and that defender's going to go running right by you. And we didn't fumble once, and Matt never slipped behind the line of scrimmage once. Simple. I mean, now this field won't be like that, but sometimes it's about as simple as like, dude, proper footwork when you're a defensive player attacking a guy with the ball on a wet field. Because if you go in out of control with a narrow base, you're going to fall right past that guy, and then he cuts it up inside for a big play. Like things like that are hugely important when preparing for a game where it's going to rain. Like it's going to rain. Just be ready for it. You also can't spend every single practice playing rain ball, and then you get to Saturday, and anyone that lives in Florida knows it can call for rain for 10 days prior to the day of the game, and then all of a sudden you get to game day and there's not a cloud in sight. Like that's Florida. But you got to be prepared for it. You just can't over prepare for it, because then if it doesn't happen, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I was looking at I've been watching the forecast like a hawk lately, and I'm not even going to be down in Miami, but it's everything that I've been seeing is that it'll rain close to up until kickoff, maybe a hair over 7:30. So to Brian's point, you don't want to prepare every single day for you're going to be playing in a torrential downpour when it might be dry. Like footballs might be dry come game time, depending on what the field's like. So, But yeah, I hated throwing wet footballs. I hated it so much.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it wasn't fun.
Irish English. Irish Breakdown is known for its objective coverage of Notre Dame football. For that reason, I think Trevor might have to recuse himself from all further discussion of Eli.
I mean, I hear your suggestion. I'm going to reject it and say we all know Trevor's love of Eli Raridon. We all accept it. We all understand that when he's talking about Eli Raridon. But at the same time, I'm also kind of like, yeah, but he's also kind of right, I think. So just because he's a fan, his fandom comes from the dude can ball. I saw him in person in the spring and in fall camp. He can ball. So it's kind of I get it. It's like Vince's love for Cam Hart. It wasn't because Cam saw him at the mall, said hi to him and his kids, and he was a fan of. It wasn't because of that. It was, dude, I watched this kid play, and this kid's a phenomenal football player and a great kid and a hard worker and all that. And yeah, he was right. But yeah, so you do not have to recuse yourself. I've heard your objection, Irish English. I've said no. Trevor, you can continue to talk about Eli Raridon all you want.
Thank goodness, because that brings up another point.
Zero passes and drops 3, and Trevor's like, he played a phenomenal game. I'm like, all right, Trev, time out. Now we're getting a little bit biased. Go ahead, man.
I was just about to say, I mean, look, it's also just about tight ends in general. I love tight ends, man. I mean, tight end blocking is impactful. Look, I could go on for days about it, but it isn't just Eli Raridon, but he's going to be a dude this year. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to talk about Eli Raridon in the tight end room today, Irish English. I appreciate you.
Yep. Good stuff.
From Tom Redinger, is the Texas A&M environment or Miami environment a tougher place to play or about the same?
It's different. I think A&M is probably a little bit tougher just from an environment standpoint. But at the end of the day, it's not as much about what environment's more tougher. What's team is better. I mean, look, Tuscaloosa wasn't a super hard place to play in 2007. That was Nick Saban's first year in Tuscaloosa. I mean, it was not a tough place to play. What makes me say that it wasn't a tough place to play? Well, I remember this team from old Louisiana coming into Alabama in 2007, a team by the old name of Louisiana Monroe, and came in and beat Alabama 21-14 in November, end of Nick Saban's first year. And wasn't a tough place to play then, right? They got beat at home by LSU that year. They got, they barely beat Houston at home that season, got beat by Georgia at home that year. So, yeah, it wasn't a tough place to play. What made it a tougher place to play 2-3 years later when nobody was going into Tuscaloosa and beating them? Was it changes to the stadium? Was it new rules? Did they do anything to make the crowd? No, it's like they were a far better team. So, the fans were a lot happier and louder watching a good team play, so, yeah, it didn't – it's not as much about that as it's about how good are you. The reason that Miami fans were so crazy in 2017 was because they had reason to be. They're kicking Notre Dame's butt. That's why I've said if Notre Dame goes down and scores on that first drive, it's a different environment. And we're not like, we've been in Hard Rock before. I don't remember being that loud. Yeah, because you beat them by 30. You kick their butt or they kick your butt. Of course, the place is going to be loud. So I just think that environment stuff gets a little bit overrated because an environment is more determined by how good the team that you're facing is. Like you can say, okay, what's the toughest place to play in college football right now? What would you say, Trev, in your opinion? Just the perception. It doesn't have to be your opinion, just the perception of what's the toughest place to play right now in college football.
Oh, the perception? I mean, probably a Penn State whiteout night game is probably
okay. All right. So if you took Kent State's team and put them on the Penn State roster and played a whiteout game at home, is that going to be a tough game for Ohio State? No.
Probably not.
Right. It's not the environment. It's the team you're facing. The reason it's a tougher game now is because Penn State's a good football team. Why is Athens, Georgia such a tough place to play right now? Because it's a really good football team. If you took like Mercer's team and put him in Georgia uniform and then had Alabama play him, it wouldn't be that tough of a game. It's not that tough of an environment. It's really about the team. That's what makes a place tough, more so than the environment.
I think it's
doesn't mean the crowd doesn't have an impact. I'm just saying at the end of the day, as Notre Dame proved last year, if you're the better team and you play like the better team, it really doesn't matter.
Sure. I think it's a little bit of both. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I do think environments can be tough to play, whether a team is like really good, like Alabama, Nick Saban level good, or if they're just middle of the road. And the Big House is a hard place to play, whether they're 8-5 or 13-0, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame in 2022.
Appalachian State would disagree with you, I say, pretending that Marshall and Northern Illinois never happened.
Well, that was going to be my point. Is in 2022, I watched Marshall beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium, but I guarantee Clemson still thought that was a hard place to play. And Notre Dame wasn't that great that year. So it's just.
But they were great that day.
Yeah, I get what you're saying in that, like, the physical building is not like what makes an environment, but it is like the team doesn't have to be undefeated and playing for a national championship either for it to still be a tough place to play. Like, that's where I'm kind of at the
team has to play well is my point. Like the crowd against Marshall was different than the crowd against Clemson. Why? A, they cared more about the game, but also B, Notre Dame gave them more reason to cheer than they did against Marshall.
Sure.
They played better.
Agreed. But still, it's a tough environment. I get what you're saying. But, I mean, look, and pertains to this question, on a week-to-week basis, it's Texas A&M hands down, in my eyes. Like, Miami's a tough environment for Notre Dame because Miami fans hate Notre Dame. But
and Florida
Texas,
State.
Yeah. But
about it.
But Texas A&M, week over week, that crowd is going to – look, for Notre Dame, it was their fourth largest crowd in that stadium's history. That's just the type of attention that Notre Dame brings. But that stadium is still over 100,000 butts in seats if they're playing Florida at home or LSU at home.
And it shakes, Trev.
Oh, yeah. I bet. I bet, man. But like for Miami, it's Notre Dame and Florida State. But if
You think
maybe
Duke
if
thinks that Miami Gardens is like Hard Rock is a tough environment? No.
that's what I'm saying. If
No.
Wake Forest is traveling down to Miami Gardens, they're not like, dude, this is the hardest place we've ever played. And look, so on a week to week basis, it's Texas A&M by a mile.
Yeah.
But if it's for Notre Dame specifically, it's close. But I'd still give the edge to Texas A&M
For sure.
Tommy Guns, who will have more sustained drives of 10 plus plays?
None of the above. I don't know that either team is going to be able to put 10 plus play drives together against the other. I think the winner of that could have one. And if I had to predict who that would be, I'd probably say Notre Dame just because of the makeup of the matchup. Yeah. But I don't know that either team's going to have that in this game.
Another one from Tommy Guns. True or false? Miami fans will be even more passionate Sunday than they were in 2017.
Going into the game, sure. Yeah. Not by a ton. I mean, they were pretty fired up that day. I was an undefeated Miami team, top 10 Miami team late in the year. So, and Notre Dame was really good too. So, but I just think this is a little bit different. Notre Dame's the defending national runners up, and they have a point to prove. They've got an alum on the sideline. Actually, they had an alum on the sidelines in 2017 as well. Mark Richt played in Miami. I keep forgetting that Mark Richt was the coach for that team, but yeah, I would say so. It's a night game. So yeah, they'll be pretty fired up. It's a Sunday. That's not like they got nothing else to do that day except sit in the parking lot and tailgate. So yeah, I would say yes.
I'm going to butcher this name.
Say
my
Herv.
Apologies here, Herv. Question from Herv. So, who will have the most success in rushing the passer?
I'm going to guess that it's Chatanye, Herv. So if I'm wrong, please tell us how to properly pronounce that. But I'll screw it up. I don't want Trevor to have to screw it up. Team-wise, I think that's going to be a big part of the game, Trev. I think there's some matchups that favor Miami in the pass rush. I think there's some matchups that favor Notre Dame on the other side of the ball in the pass rush. The more known commodities, probably Miami, because Ruben Bain's a more proven commodity. But, I mean, Notre Dame's got several guys that proved last year they can get after the quarterback. Boubacar in limited opportunities. Once Donovan Hinish became a regular, full participant in the rotation after Howard Cross went down, all of a sudden Notre Dame's getting after the quarterback. So I would argue that it's slightly favors Notre Dame from a depth of pass rusher standpoint. Notre Dame can throw more waves at Miami than I think Miami can throw at Notre Dame. The most singular proven pass rusher in the game, however, has a green and orange U on his helmet. That's Ruben Bain. So that's really going to be a big part of it is can the unit at Notre Dame outperform the couple of really good pass rushers that Miami has? I think that's going to be a key to that, Trev.
Yeah, we see that the same. From Brandon Plensner. Since Stroman and Schuler both fit more the boundary type safety profile, do you see a different starter at safety throughout the season based on opponent, or does Stroman hold it down permanently?
If Stroman doesn't hold it down permanently, it'll be more so about his play, not matchups. And I think where Brandon's getting from it is like, okay, let's say you're playing a team that's more vertically oriented and you need to play the post a lot more with him. Do you maybe go to Luke Talich more or Tay Johnson more? Possibly. But at the end of the day, I don't think who matters. It matters a lot who starts there. If you're playing a game, if let's say looking at the schedule, Notre Dame gets to the USC game, and let's say Jaden Maeva is everything that USC fans think they're going to be, and Mekhi Lemon and is what he was last year, and Jacoby Lane is exactly what Trevor thinks he's going to be because you had him on your first team preseason all opponent squad, right? Didn't you have Jacoby Lane on your first team, second team?
Mm-mm. Yeah, I had Mekhi Lemon on my second team. Okay, I didn't have
Jacoby's on your
Lane
second team.
No, I didn't have Jacoby on any of them.
I know you like him and you think he's a good player. He's what Trev thinks he's going to be, and Lake McRae's what we both think he's going to be, and it's a vintage Lincoln Riley offense. You can say, look, we need to match up more at times with a more rangy safety. So maybe as the game goes on, you see more Tay Johnson, you see more Luke Talich at certain times. I think it'll be more of that throughout the game, but I think Jalen Stroman is still your starter going into the game. You just may see different volume of reps that he gets or different matchups where, maybe him and Adon are kind of rotating in at times for each other and they're playing more Tay or somebody else, maybe Jadon's playing more by then, that type of stuff. It'll be more so as the game goes on that changes. I don't know that they'll necessarily change the starting lineup from week to week. If a guy earns that spot, I think he'll earn that spot. And what I'll say about Jalen Stroman has been that type of player at Virginia Tech. I have to think that someone like Mike Mickens has watched him play enough in fall camp to say he can play the post if he just never was asked to do that at Virginia Tech. I would think that they think he can do it, though.
Mm-hmm. Tommy Guns, true or false, Notre Dame can still win if CJ Carr throws for 150 yards or less. Would that say more about Notre Dame or Miami?
Well, yeah, it says more about Notre Dame. If Notre Dame goes out there and just CJ throws for $135 and Notre Dame just runs for 295 yards and CJ goes 9 of 15 for 145 yards and throws 2 touchdowns and no picks, and Jeremiah Love goes for $120 and Jadarian goes for 95 and Aeneas or Nolan James comes in and runs for 30 and CJ has 25 yards on keeps. Yeah, Notre Dame can win the game. Absolutely. And that says more about Notre Dame. It means that Notre Dame's a dominant team. It doesn't mean that Miami's not good. I think it would like perfect example, the 2017 NC State team all year was really good up front, except for one game against Notre Dame. Why? Well, because Notre Dame was really good, and they played really well in that game. It was a great game for them. I don't think NC State didn't play hard. It's just man-to-man, they just weren't as good as the guys they were going against, and Notre Dame executed incredibly well. It said a lot more about Notre Dame than it did NC State. Would you agree with that, Trev?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would. I mean,
now it could mean the opposite, Trev, but I don't think it doesn't inherently mean the opposite. That's where I'm coming from. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
No, it's just 150 passing yards is just such a tough gauge to say what it says more. That game could play out in so many different ways. Here's a third factor. Would it say more about Notre Dame or Miami, or would it say most about the weather conditions that they were playing in? Notre Dame's playing in a torrential downpour. I don't see CJ Carr having much more than 150 yards passing, barring a couple big screen plays that go or a bust in coverage from Miami. It could also mean Notre Dame wins 10-3 and their defense is just insane. Or Miami's offense had a really bad day, or so. That's just such a tough. Such a tough measurement to use. I get where you're coming from here, but I would say it would say more about Notre Dame's ability to win if they do win with CJ Carr throwing for 150, but also different level of opponent. I watched Notre Dame beat a team 66-7 with their starting quarterback throwing for like 100 yards. So it depends on how the game plays out. Yeah. So,
but what if CJ throws for 125 in the first half and Notre Dame's up 31-0, and he's on pace for 250, but they're up 31-0 or 31-3, and they're not going to put him in a chance on a wet field of making a mistake? That's what context matters so much in this kind of conversation. But could they win? Of course. Of course they could.
Well, absolutely. I mean, watch right.
Go ahead.
Right now, FanDuel has them, favored to win by 3 points, and CJ Carr's over/under for passing yards is 185. And that's only 35 more yards than what you have in your scenario here, T-Guns. So it depends on how the game plays out. Depends on the scenario, man.
Archer, don't get mad at me for saying this, but I watched Michigan beat Ohio State last year throwing for 62 yards, and I watched them beat Alabama throwing for 75 yards. That doesn't even get them to 150 in those two games combined. I watched them beat USC throwing for 32 yards. They beat Minnesota throwing for 86 yards. The game where they threw for the most yards last year, they lost by 19. Oh, I'm sorry. I was wrong. The game they threw for the most yards last year, they lost by 14. Their second most passing yards last year, they lost by 19. Context matters.
Yeah.
So I hope that they don't. I want to, because I just want to see more throwing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even that I don't want them to win now. I just want to see more throwing. That's my big thing, Trev.
Yeah. Super chat from Kyle Berry. Thank you, Kyle. Unrelated question to Miami, but if Notre Dame gets a top 4 seed, the schedule would be interesting. Last game, Stanford on November 29th, and a month plus wait until the quarterfinals on New Year's Eve. Would we prefer a 5 seed over a 4 seed?
Kyle, I have been adamant about this since they changed the rule. I said, look, I am not a fan of this for Notre Dame. I think it benefited Notre Dame that they couldn't get a 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed, especially a 1 or 2 seed or 2 or 3 seed. Because I've always felt like this: if you're the number 1 team in the country, but you can't get a bye, that means you're number 5. That means you're the number 1 team and you get a 12 seed in round 1. You don't have to wait over a month to play a game, and there's the potential, like this would have been the case last year. If the season plays out for the 12 seed this year the way it did last year, meaning it was a team that played in the conference championship game and either won their way into it, or let's say that team loses, you're now playing a team that's played twice since the last time you played, if they then go into the playoffs and win their 5 versus 12 matchup, let's just say. So let's say Clemson upsets a team. They're the 12 seed again. They beat Texas in round 1, and then you get them in round 2. They've played 2 games since you last played. I don't love that for Notre Dame at all. Now, it's not an excuse to lose, but I think it can make it harder. Just the team is a little bit more in game shape. They're a little bit more locked in. They've been through some of those physical battles. You haven't practiced the way that they're playing because you don't practice anymore like you used to. So I absolutely would prefer the 5. Plus, you win the first round game. You're the number 1 team. You're getting the number 4 seed, in that next round, who is a team that was below you. So you're getting an inferior opponent again. I thought it was a great situation for Notre Dame. Now, I also don't think that it's necessarily, look, I would have loved to have had an extra couple weeks off for Jeremiah Love to rest last season and not have to play against Indiana.
That was going to be my point. It's, again, Kyle, like we said with the last question, context matters. What is the state of health with the team by the time they get done with Stanford? Are they just banged up beyond all recognition, and they're just, their starters are all just limping through because the first part of their season was super tough? I think it just kind of depends. I really do. I think it's also tough because the one sample size that we have to go on is every single team that had a bye last year all lost in their first opportunity. I don't know if that's going to happen this year. It might, it might not. So all of those things combined, ideal state, if you asked me today, which you did, I would prefer Notre Dame to have a 5 seed. I also love the idea of hosting a home playoff game. I think that was really cool for South Bend. It was cool to be awesome. A part of. That environment was crazy. But with that being said, I'm also not opposed to the idea of Notre Dame having to play 1 less game to win a potential national championship. And if the team is super banged up, who knows? That's a month off last year. We talked about Howard Cross's inability to be effective in the postseason. Imagine if he got a month off to just rehab the ankle. Is he in better shape for some of those games?
You get him healthier, Jeremiah healthier. That's a great point, Trev.
So you never know. There's arguments to be made on both sides, man. But
does Riley Mills get hurt in the quarters? Playing that extra game? Riley got hurt in the quarterfinals. Rocco got hurt in that game.
I was just about to say Rocco can be healthier. Like, it's just
Rocco was playing really good football going into the playoffs.
Then
he gets hurt against Indiana.
You might still have Cooper Flanagan. Who knows? Look, man.
Including now.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point. So there's positives to either one.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to have. I just think that extra time off. I think Notre Dame would be wise maybe to find a way to. Isn't there a rule that if you play like at Hawaii, you can get a 13th game? I think that's still a thing. Maybe that Notre Dame schedules a game like that or something. That'd be interesting. Take them on a little vacation after the regular season's over or something like that. Yeah. We'll see. Good one.
Insured by Big, our resident LSU fan in the chat. Who has more of a challenge, a new offensive coordinator or new defensive coordinator, when it comes to game 1 implementation and communication? Thank you.
Well, let's remove the context of who are you playing and just say all things are equal. Same kind of opponent, same situation, whatever. I still think it's harder for an offensive coordinator if rosters are similar. Again, so like, for example, in your situation, your defensive coordinator Baker's walking into a much different situation than his first year than what Chris Ash is walking into. in that Chris Ash is walking into a pretty darn good situation. Great defense already, talented defense, no remaking needing to be done. Whereas Baker's walking into a thing where your defense was terrible the year before, and he's got to get new players and fix the culture and all that. So if the OC is walking into a great culture and a great team, it's different than a DC. So again, all things being equal, I think an offensive coordinator says a tougher test because you have so many more things that have to go together. Quarterback, receivers need cohesion. Offensive line needs cohesion. There's a lot more, just kind of terminology and checks and different things like that. And it's just it's a different animal, in my opinion, for an offensive coordinator, all things being equal. Defensively, if you're walking into a good situation, you should still be able to keep your defense going pretty good. Or you should be able to rebound pretty quickly if they weren't good, but you have good players, but they weren't a good defense. I think it's just a little bit easier. If you're a good coach, you can win both. I just think it's a slightly easier for a defensive coordinator than an offensive coordinator, just because you all got to play together, like terminology-wise. Everybody's got to know what they're going to do. But the thing about defense is it's an individual sport on defense, meaning you're playing as a unit, but I've got this gap, you've got that gap. We're not both taking on. You don't have like the three technique in the nose. Hey, we're going to both come off and hit this guy and combo tackle him to the quarterback. It doesn't work like that. Now there's timing, slants and twists. But it's still an individual sport where the corner, other than like from a communication standpoint, like physically it's an individual sport. Communication, it's a unit thing. But individually, once the ball snapped, I got my job, you got your job, you got your job, you got your job. And if everybody does their job, you're pretty good. But a receiver can do his job, but he's dependent on the quarterback. And there's that relationship there. There's just more that can go wrong there than once the ball snapped for a corner or DB as far as just as a unit. Same thing on offensive line. Both units need communication, but there's way more cohesion needed from an offensive line than there is a defensive line. So I just think things like that are what make it a little bit harder for an OC, but there's challenges for both.
From AFTD 2007, follow up to my last question a couple days ago. Again, you got a scholarship to two schools, Michigan or LSU. Who are you winning a championship for? Doing this for you, insured by Big.
Look, I think I'm going to pull a John Elway. I'm going to go choose baseball. Yeah. I might choose baseball. I just number one, I don't know that I'd want to play at Michigan for what's going on there with all the craziness. And I wouldn't want to play for Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
I have to think that if I have offers there, I have other, I'd rather be a Raging Cajun.
Yeah, if you're getting looked at by Michigan or LSU, you probably got some other good. The thing that stinks is I would be so down to go play for LSU if Brian Kelly wasn't the coach.
100%. Oh yeah,
that'd be so sweet. Honestly, but that's a pretty big caveat. So yeah, I'll probably walk on somewhere. Or
I would, and I'd have no problem playing at Michigan. It's the current circumstances that makes it that way. And if they had different situations, I'd rather play at Michigan than at LSU. Just because I think I'd probably fit in more in Ann Arbor, Michigan than I would in a Baton Rouge.
I get you.
Not better, not worse. It's just look, there's places I've been that I love going to visit. I wouldn't ever want to live there.
Tom Redinger, any surprise that Bryce Young was listed as starter over Burnham and not listed as or? What's that mean for you guys as far as how good Bryce Young is going to be this year?
I wasn't surprised because I was told beforehand it was going to be that way. I might have been a little bit more surprised if I wasn't given a heads up. So it's hard for me to really answer that question honestly, but thinking back to when I was first told, I was a little surprised that they were going to start the two guys they were going to start, not either of the veterans. Surprised there wasn't an or. Yeah, I'll say I was a little surprised by that. Yeah, I'll say that. What does it mean as far as how Bryce is going to be? I think this was very much this is how well Boubacar and Bryce are playing, and not Josh is struggling. Josh was a little banged up in fall camp. I think he's going to be fine. Junior's playing fine. Logan Thomas is doing his thing. It's more so just Bubakar and Bryce were really good. Bryce got off to a little bit of a slow start in fall camp. What I was told is he's just pressing. He's just trying to just make every play instead of just like, dude, just relax and go do your job. If he didn't make, he'd get down on himself, and he settled in a little bit. And, I was been pretty good second half of camp. So I think that's part of it. So I think it speaks volumes to, hopefully he's poised for a big year. You hope that's the reason they're both starting, is because of that, not anything else.
Yep. Agreed. Another one from Christian Shout. Brian, what was your most dominant win as a coach, and what was the worst loss?
The worst loss as a coach is easy. When I was at Duquesne, we played at Penn, and they absolutely annihilated us. We got hammered in that game. Just from start to finish, just got absolute whooped. Most dominant win, it's hard at the D3 level. You play some teams that are just not good, and you have some pretty dominant. Probably the two most dominant that I can think of. My first year coaching at Denison or at Wittenberg, we beat Denison. I'm looking it up right now. I know it was 70-something. We beat them 72-14. That was a pretty dominant win. We beat Kings Point 54-3 when I was at Muhlenberg. We beat, I think we beat Franklin and Marshall that year, like 60-something to 14. That was a pretty dominant win. We crushed them pretty good that year. I think so. Let me see. Beat Kings Point 54-3. Let's see here. 60. Yeah, we beat Franklin and Marshall 68-22, and it was 44-7 at halftime. We called the dogs off a little bit in that one. And then trying to think. Yeah, those were really the most dominant ones. The Penn game was our worst loss. We just got annihilated. Mount Union beat us pretty good at Wittenberg. Our kids played their butts off. Mount Union was just unbelievably good. Starting defensive end on that Mount Union team that beat us in 01? Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell.
No kidding.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's cool.
He had transferred there from Pitt. He's a good football player. But, it's probably the worst loss that we had was at Penn. Just because it was crushing too. We thought we were going to play well in that game and beat Penn, and they kicked our absolute butts. So that probably my worst loss. I'll say this: that year we did go against. I do like bringing this up, but we played against LaSalle when I was at Duquesne, and their head coach was Phil Longo, the guy who was at North Carolina and recently Wisconsin, and we beat them. I think it was like the final score. It was. Where is it? Where's LaSalle on this one? 62-14. That was a pretty dominant win. Yeah, it's a pretty dominant win. So I'll take that one. Yeah, we beat Butler that year 49-0. They're pretty good. But yeah, so those are probably my biggest, most dominant wins as a coach.
Andre Tonsel, what is your pregame food and drink?
Do you have one, Trev? So I have a weird one. So I've never gotten out of coach mode or player mode. And as coach and player mode, you're eating the same breakfast every day because it's being fed to you by the cafeteria. And I have to have on game days some eggs and potatoes. I just like, need it. Need it.
Yeah, as a player, like we would always go get like sandwiches at Subway or something. Just get something light, like a turkey sandwich or something like that. As a fan, I don't have one. It depends on the setting that we're in. If we're going tailgating, we're eating tailgate food. And if we're hosting something here, we're probably having buffalo chicken dip and brats or something. But as a player, it was like same breakfast. I'm with you. I would have 2 eggs, sunny side up, toast. Lunch, it was whatever the cafeteria served that day. It's probably bad. And then we would go and get like Subway after school or something. So nothing too fancy, Andre.
Whatever my mom's cooking when we have tailgates, that's that one.
Irish Gordian Knot, if you could steal one player away from Miami before the game, who would you take?
I wouldn't take anybody. I mean, it just I don't look at it that way. They have their team. Notre Dame has their team. Like, are there good players that could play at Notre Dame? Sure. Like, if I say, okay, what if I say, like, I'll take this guy? You're like, well, you don't think that guy from Notre Dame's any good? Well, they have good players. Are there some players that Miami can start at Notre Dame? Sure. Not a ton, but there are some. There are some.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I say one guy in particular, then they're, oh, you're a hater. Okay, whatever. But, yeah, there's some. I wouldn't take their quarterback. That's for sure. I wouldn't take anybody at running back. I wouldn't take anybody at tight end. I wouldn't take anybody at wide receiver. I wouldn't take anybody at linebacker. I wouldn't take any of their DBs. I wouldn't take their quarterback. And I'll just leave it at that.
Irishman 7114. In each of your primes, who would win a quarterback skills competition?
People trying to start some stuff today, Trev. What's going on with that, man?
I don't know.
So
I'll nix it. It'd be Brian. I didn't play in college.
That doesn't mean that you weren't a good player in high school. It just means they didn't see you play. So I'd say I was a better athlete. Let's leave it at that.
100%.
That's based on what Trevor's told me about his athletic skills. But
yeah, I was accurate. I had a quick release. I could put the ball where I wanted it to, but I had the mobility of an office chair on carpet. So
I've never heard that before. An office chair on carpet. That's great.
Look, man, I'm just not. Oh. I just wasn't fast. I wish I could have been, but I wasn't.
Yeah. So then it would be, what system are we playing in then? How about them apples? But if we were teammates, I would just say, hey, look, I'll move to receiver because I was a pretty good receiver too. So
there you go.
Yeah, my second high school game at receiver, when my stupid coach moved me over, I set a school record with 5 touchdowns. I had 4 touchdown catches and a pick 6. How about them apples? I just outbundied you. So Trevor could throw to me, not the other way around. So how about that? We'll just go with that. Deal. We were both on our prime when we were teammates.
If you were throwing to me, that says more about the receiving core on our team than it does about either of us. Yeah. Jason Smith, is it easier for a transfer to go somewhere new and hit the ground running as a wide receiver or defensive back?
So there's obviously a lot of different things, Jason, is the complexity of the system, all that time stuff. If all things were being equal, there's not a lot of difference for me. I'd say it's probably a little bit easier at receiver because I think DB requires a little bit more technical prowess that maybe you don't have to make a change from a system. But again, if that's an all things being equal, let's say you're following your defensive coordinator over to another school, they're very similar. Yeah. It's still just about, are you a talented player or not? I still think that's a big part of it. The only thing that makes me lean DB is because at receiver, you have to kind of get on the same page with a quarterback, whereas as DB, you don't. For example, it'd be easier in the NFL to sign a guy off somebody else's roster because you have a need and then plug him in at corner than it would be to plug a guy in at wide receiver who has no trust in relation with a quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
That's where I'm at. And then last one, I'll bring this up. This is from John Banco. John said, prayers for all involved in the school shooting in Minnesota. Terrible stuff. That obviously broke before the show. Don't know a lot of particulars, but we were told that 2 children lost their lives. That's it. So incredibly tragic. I would ask that all of y'all that believe in the power of prayer, pray for those families. Despite what the mayor of that city said, prayer is always something that can make an impact. So pray for those families who are hurting tonight. And then there's still some people at the school that were injured. We don't know the severity of it. Pray for healing for them. So it's never an easy thing to deal with, obviously. So we certainly lift up those our fellow citizens in prayer, and it was at a church school. So obviously these most likely come from families that are believers. We just pray that they lean on Christ at this time, and that can get them through this period of time, which is on a human level is incredibly sad and tragic. So John, you did put this super chat up very early but I felt like it was better to kind of wait till the end of the show to bring this up, because I never feel comfortable bringing something like this up and like, all right, back to the breakdown of the game. It feels kind of like, does it really matter at that point in time? So I really appreciate that. And then Remington just threw a super chat up as well. Remington said, did you see the possibility of Mario sitting up in the booth? He would be the first head coach in the booth. What's your thoughts? The person who put that up also put a tweet out today about me. The guy's an absolute liar, fraud. I don't know who this guy is. He just makes up crap. It's best to block him and ignore him. That was 100% a false tweet. There is no that's absolutely just not true. But nowadays it's so hard to tell on Twitter what's true or not true. So, but that guy needs therapy. He needs a therapist, like really, really bad. So, but I still appreciate your super chat, Remington, very much. But yeah, man. So I appreciate that, Remington. I appreciate everybody that left comments today. John Banco, thank you for putting that super chat up with that prayer request, so we could talk about that at the end. But yeah, don't forget that as my guy D Masak said, don't forget to hit that like button on your way out of here, folks. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Also subscribe to our CFB Nation channel on YouTube, because tomorrow night at 8:00, that guy right there is going to go live with Vince, and they're going to be talking about some odds. They're going to be looking at all the FanDuel odds, team odds, spreads, over under lines, money lines, some prop bets, different things like that. They're going to be talking about all that tomorrow. You're definitely going to want to check that out. And then obviously we're going to have a lot of great content this week here at Irish Breakdown. Going to have some more videos out the next couple days on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That will be for message board members only, so you want to check that out as well. 5:00 tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. Trevor and I will be back tomorrow. 1:00 tomorrow, we're going to have our predictions. We're going to do keys to victory. We're going to do game records predictions, and then we're going to make our game predictions. And then after that, we're going to make our predictions for some of the big games. We'll be talking LSU Clemson. We'll be talking about Texas Ohio State, some other big games tomorrow, so we'll have that as well. So join us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again here very soon.